The night stuck to you in New Orleans. It wasn't just the rain, which had finally stopped, leaving the Royal Street bricks slick and smelling of damp stone and old iron. It was the air itself, so thick with humidity and the ghost of spilled bourbon you felt like you were wading through it. My name is Ava Quintana, and this was my second shift of the week at Bayou and Brass. Through the frosted glass, the world was a blur of neon and carriages, but inside, the only sound was the strained, off-key wandering of a trumpet. The jazz trio was playing low tonight and not by choice. The whole place felt wrong. Usually, a Tuesday was slow, easy money. But tonight, the main dining room was half empty, the chatter nervous, the kitchen. Normally a riot of clanging pans and chef yelling in Creole was muffled. The silence was coming from the back room, the private room. A group of men had arrived an hour ago, stepping out of black cars that looked too clean for this neighborhood. They wore dark suits, shoes shined to a mirror finish, and they didn't talk loud. They didn't have to. I saw the ink creeping past the cuffs of their shirt symbols I didn't recognize, which was probably for the best. They had taken the back room, and the restaurant had held its breath ever since. Jules, the manager, scurried over, wiping his damp palms on his apron. He was a good man, but he wasn't built for this kind of pressure. "Ava," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Table 13. They're yours tonight." He didn't say the VIPs. He didn't say the men in the back. He just said table 13, and the number hung in the air like a bad omen. He pushed a damp, water-stained menu into my hand. My stomach hollowed out. I didn't want this table. I just wanted to get through the next 3 hours, collect my tips, and go home. My wallet was painfully thin. I had exactly $23 in cash, and the pharmacy bill for Mom's COPD medication was sitting on the kitchen counter, unopened but heavy. $23 wouldn't even cover the co-pay. I nodded, forcing my face into the mask of polite service. Right, table 13. As I turned, a hand snagged my arm, a tourist at table 4, red-faced and smelling of sugary hurricanes, leered up at me. "Where's the fire, darling? Sit a spell." His hand was damp and cold, clamped onto the sleeve of my uniform. I didn't flinch. I just planted my feet and pulled my arm free with a steady, practiced motion. "Enjoy your meal, sir," I said, giving him the smile. The one that costs nothing but buys you space. The one that says, "I'm not real." He grumbled, turning back to his crawfish étouffée. I quickly retied the strings of my apron, pulling the knot tight, centering myself, invisible. Precise. Polite. That was the mantra. That's how you survive a shift. That's how you survive. Period. I walked to the heavy oak door of the back room. I could feel the bass of the men's voices through the wood. Not loud, but low, like an engine idling. I balanced the heavy silver tray on my hip, took a deep breath to steady myself, and used my shoulder to slide the door open. The air hit me first. It was a physical wall of cigar smoke, thick and sweet, laced with the sharp, woody smell of aged oak whiskey, expensive stuff, and lots of it. The room was dark, paneled in that deep mahogany that swallows light. 8 men sat around a large circular table, the surface littered with heavy glasses and half-empty bottles. And at the head of the table, facing the door, sat him. He wasn't the biggest man in the room. He wasn't the loudest. He wasn't doing anything at all, just sitting with a kind of profound indifference. His shoulders relaxed. He wore a simple white shirt, the top 2 buttons undone. No tie. A thin, simple steel watch was visible on his left wrist as he rested his hand near his glass. He wasn't leaning into the conversation. He was letting the table come to him. My gaze snagged on him for just a second too long. He must have felt it, because he lifted his head. His eyes met mine. They were gray, not warm, stormy gray, but cold, flat, silver gray, like the surface of a lake just before it freezes. Impossibly still. He wasn't sizing me up. He was just looking, seeing everything. I felt a chill crawl straight up my spine, prickling the hairs on my neck. I snapped my eyes down to the floor. my professionalism kicking in like a shield. "Good evening," I murmured, my voice sounding thin and reedy. "What can I get for you, gentlemen?" A man to his left, one with a nasty white scar that pulled his lip into a permanent sneer, chuckled. I know what I'd like. He said something crude, something about the dessert menu that wasn't on the menu, and the other men laughed. A low rumble. I ignored it, invisible. "Another round of the Macallan, gentlemen, or perhaps coffee?" "Just the whiskey," Scarface said, shoving his glass toward me. As I reached for it, another man jostled his elbow, and the heavy crystal tumbler tipped. Amber liquid sloshed over the rim. Right toward my tray. I snapped the tray sideways, the bottles and glasses rattling, avoiding the spill by a fraction of an inch. A few drops splashed onto my hand, cold and stinging. "Watch it, Rico," one of the men growled. My hand was trembling. I could feel the heat rising in my face, the sting of humiliation. I fumbled for my notepad, pretending to write down the order I already knew, just to have something to do, just to hide the shaking. Precise. As I scribbled, I felt a vibration in my apron pocket. My phone. My heart seized. Nobody called me during a shift unless it was an emergency. Mom. It had to be Mom. The men were arguing now. Something about shipping manifests and the West Bank. Their attention was off me. I angled my body away, dipping my hand into my pocket, pulling the phone just far enough out to glimpse the screen. It wasn't Mom. It was my little brother, Diego. A text message. "Ava, you need to call me. Those city inspectors are here again." My blood went cold. Here meant Mom's stall at the Bywater Market. The Urban Commerce Bureau was a joke, a fictional name for the thugs who'd been shaking down the small-time vendors for months. A second text popped up before I could reply. "They're at Mom's stall right now. They say her permit is invalid. They want money. Ava. They're demanding protection money. Right out in the open." I stared at the words, the room dissolving around me. Mom's lungs were bad. She couldn't handle this kind of stress. The $23 in my wallet felt like ash. We didn't have the money. We didn't have any money. A wave of pure, cold desperation washed over me, so strong it made me dizzy. I felt trapped, suffocated by the smoke and the low voices and the absolute, crushing weight of being poor. I must have made a sound, a small gasp, or maybe my face just crumpled. Because when I looked up, he was watching me again. The man at the head of the table, the man with the still, gray eyes. His gaze had narrowed. He hadn't seen the phone, but he'd seen the shift. He saw that flicker of raw panic, the moment the professional mask cracked and the terrified girl underneath looked out. He saw the desperation. He tilted his head, just slightly, a silent question, but he said nothing. He just filed it away. Another piece of information, another soul cataloged. I shoved the phone back into my pocket, my breath catching in my throat. "Excuse me," I whispered, gathering the empty glasses with a rattling clatter. I needed to get out. I needed to call Diego. I needed to breathe. I turned my back, clutching the tray, and pushed for the door. The panic was a living thing, clawing its way up my throat, these men in their dark suits demanding whiskey, the inspectors in their cheap suits, demanding money we didn't have. They were all the same, different sides of the same rotten coin. The desperation and the anger and the fear all collided, and as I fumbled for the door handle, a name pushed its way out of my memory. A name I'd heard whispered by the old fishermen on the docks, a name spoken in hushed tones in the back rooms of bars just like this one, a name that belonged to the shadows, a name that meant power, a name that meant fear. I didn't mean to say it. It was an exhale, a curse, a prayer. Salvatore Mancini? It was so quiet, I barely heard it myself. But they heard it. The room didn't just go quiet, it went dead. The engine rumble of conversation cut off as if a wire had been snipped. The only sound was the scrape of a chair leg on the wooden floor, loud as a gunshot in the sudden vacuum. The jazz trio outside, sensing the void, stuttered and stopped. Mid-note. The trumpet choked. I froze, my hand on the door. Slowly, I turned around. Every man at the table was staring at me, not with amusement, not with anger, but with a kind of stark, cold shock. Even Rico, the man with the scar, looked pale. My eyes flew to the head of the table. He was standing, Salvatore Mancini. He moved with a lethal grace, no wasted motion. He picked up his whiskey glass from the table. For a second, I thought he would throw it. Instead, he set it down again, very deliberately, on the polished wood. The glass made no sound at all. His eyes found mine. They were no longer still. They were active, intense, and they pinned me to the wall. It was a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. The truth, a name that was never supposed to be spoken, was hanging in the air. A bomb had been detonated, and I was the one holding the match. The entire order of the night, of my life, had just shifted, and the ground was gone from beneath my feet, my knees locked, the tray in my hands, loaded with heavy glasses, suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I had said his name. I had said the name, the one that wasn't even a whisper, the one that was just a shape in the shadows of the French Quarter, Salvatore Mancini, and he was standing. The silence was a creature, a heavy, suffocating thing that crushed the air. The scrape of his chair was the only sound, and now, nothing. Just his eyes, those flat, silver-gray eyes, fixed on me, seeing right through my cheap uniform, past my rehearsed smile, and into the raw panic that was making my heart try to beat its way out of my chest. The backroom door burst open, slamming against the wall. It was Jules, my manager. His face was slick with sweat, his eyes wide with the kind of terror that only comes from managing a restaurant on the verge of ruin. He hadn't heard the name. He had just felt the silence. He had seen the music stop. "Ava," he hissed, his voice cracking. He didn't come all the way in. He just grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. "What are you doing? Get out now." He yanked me backward, pulling me out of the room like I was a child being saved from a fire. The heavy door swung shut between us and them, muffling the silence, but not breaking the spell. He dragged me a few feet into the main dining room, which was now deathly quiet, the few remaining tourists looking around, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Are you crazy?" Jules whispered when shaking me slightly. "You don't stare. You don't talk. You don't even breathe near those men. What did you say in there?" My God, the music stopped. Before I could form a word, before I could even try to explain that I had just signed our collective death warrant, the door to the back room opened again. It wasn't Mancini. It was a different man, one I hadn't really noticed. He was tall, thin, and wore his suit like it was a part of him. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his eyes holding no emotion at all. He didn't look at Jules. He looked straight at me. "Mister, Mancini wants the girl to stay," he said. His voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it terrifying. Jules's hand flew off my arm as if I'd become red hot. His face, already pale, went the color of tallow. "Stay." Yes, of course. "Ava, you..." But the world had decided to tilt again. Clang, clang, clang. The brass bells on the front door of the restaurant jangled violently. The door flew open, and 2 men stepped in. These were not Mancini's men. These men were cheap. They wore gray, ill-fitting polyester suits that shined under the dim restaurant lights. They smelled of stale cigarettes and the kind of false authority that comes from a small-time grift. One was paunchy, with a face like a spoiled potato. The other was thin and weaselly, holding a clipboard like a weapon. "Urban Commerce Bureau," the paunchy one barked, his voice too loud for the room. He flashed a laminated ID on a clip, but he did it so fast it was just a blur of yellow and black. Jules spun around, his body vibrating with this new, more familiar kind of panic. "Gentlemen, what is this? It's almost 9 o'clock. "We're here on a safety and compliance check," the weasel-faced one said, tapping his clipboard. His eyes scanned the room, skipping over the few diners, skipping over Jules, and landing on me. It was too fast, too specific. This wasn't a random inspection. You, Ponchi said, pointing a thick finger. You're the waitress, Ava Quintana. My blood, which had been frozen, now turned to ice. First Diego's text. Now this, they knew my name. Yes, that's me. We have a report, Weasel said, making a show of clicking his pen. A credible, anonymous report that you served alcohol to a minor approximately 1 hour ago. The room tilted. A lie. A complete, bald-faced lie. I was meticulous. I checked IDs on anyone who looked under 40. That's not true, I said, my voice shaking. It's a Class A violation, Miss Quintana, Ponchi said, his voice dropping into an oily, confidential tone. He was talking to Jules now, the poor, terrified rabbit. We could pull this establishment's liquor license tonight, shut you down before the 10 o'clock news. Jules made a small, strangled sound. Unless, Ponchi continued, letting the word hang in the air, we can come to an understanding, a sign of cooperation, to make this go away. There it was, the other side of the shakedown, the same one they were pulling on my mother. The door to the back room was still ajar. The tall, quiet man, let's call him Silas, was still standing there, a silent sentinel, watching this new drama unfold. And then the drama collided. Rico, the man with the scar from inside the back room, pushed the door open wider, and he was annoyed. What the hell is all this noise we're trying to... He stopped. He saw the 2 fake inspectors. He saw them crowding me. Saw Jules wringing his hands, and he smirked. That ugly, twisted smile. He stalked over, his heavy footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. He looked the inspectors up and down with open contempt. What is this? A high school play. Can't you see we're in a private meeting? Inspectors. Ponchi, drunk on his own fake power, didn't recognize the danger. This is official city business, sir. I'm going to have to ask you to step back. Rico let out a short, barking laugh. He turned his gaze on me, his eyes filled with a casual cruelty. This little thing causing all this trouble. He reached out and put his hand on my shoulder. His fingers dug in, pinching the muscle, digging into the bone. Maybe she needs to be taught some respect for city officials. I winced, trying to twist away, but his grip was like a steel clamp. A new voice cut through the air. It was low, calm, and carried absolute authority. I wouldn't do that. Salvatore Mancini was standing in the doorway. He hadn't moved into the light. He was just a dark shape against the dark wood. But his presence filled the entire building. He stepped forward into the dim light of the dining room. He wasn't looking at the inspectors. He was looking at Rico. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move his hands. He just glanced, a tiny, fractional flick of his eyes, at Silas, the tall man. Silas moved. It wasn't fast. It was just inevitable. He took one step, positioning himself between Rico and me. He didn't grab Rico's arm. He didn't make a scene. He simply reached out and placed his thumb and forefinger on Rico's wrist. Rico's face contorted. A gasp of pain, sharp and sudden, hissed through his teeth. His hand sprang open, releasing my shoulder. My apologies, boss, Rico choked out, cradling his wrist as he stumbled back. Silas hadn't even left a mark. He just turned the pressure off. Now, Mancini turned his attention to the 2 inspectors. They looked confused, their script forgotten. They had just seen their power play get completely and silently dismantled. Mancini walked slowly toward them. His movements were fluid, like a predator's. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and took out a slim, black card. It wasn't a credit card. It was metal, matte black, and heavy. He didn't flash it. He didn't slam it down. He just placed it, very gently, on the table next to them. "Gentlemen," he said. His voice was still quiet, but it resonated in my bones. "You seem to have a deep interest in compliance. I'm just curious if this particular inspection, at this particular moment, is one you want on the public record." Hansen and Pitts stared at the card. They stared at Mancini. They stared at the circle of men, Silas, Rico. the others who were now emerging from the back room, a silent, watchful wall of dark suits. The inspectors were sweating now. The cheap fabric of their suits was dark under the arms. This was my chance. The panic from Diego's text, the humiliation from Rico, the terror from these fake cops, it all coalesced into a single, sharp point of anger. I was not invisible. I was the target. My voice came out, shaking, but it was loud. "You're lying!" Every head in the room snapped to me. I jabbed a finger at Hansen. "I didn't serve any minor. You're not here for that. You're here because of my mother." Hansen's oily smile melted. "I don't know what you're talking about, lady." "My mother, Elena Quintana." My voice grew stronger with every word. "She has a stall at the Bywater Market. You were there this morning. You and him?" I pointed at Weasel. "You told her you were from Urban Commerce. You told her permits were wrong. You tried to make her sign something. You demanded money." Absolute pin-drop silence. Jules looked at me like I had just set myself on fire. The two inspectors were frozen solid. This was not in the script. How did the waitress connect this? How did she know? I looked past them, my eyes finding Mancini's. A shadow of a smile, so fast I almost missed it, touched the corner of his mouth. He looked at the inspectors, an expression of mild, academic curiosity on his face. "The Bywater Market," he mused. As if tasting the words, he filed it away. "Well, now I know." He turned his head slightly, speaking to Silas. Then he pulled out his phone, and he didn't scroll. He tapped a single contact, put the phone to his ear, and spoke without preamble. "Bywater Market, the vendors, all of them. Bring them here, now." He hung up. "Whoa, what is this?" Hansen sputtered, his fake authority crumbling. "This is obstruction of an official. We were leaving." "We'll wait," Mancini said simply. He gestured to a chair at an empty table. "Have a seat. We can all cooperate, together." The two inspectors were trapped. They couldn't stay. They couldn't push past the wall of silent men. They stood in the middle of the room, vibrating with fear. We waited. It wasn't long, maybe 3 minutes, 4. It felt like an eternity. The front door opened again. No bells this time, just a cautious push. Mrs. Tran, who ran the bakery stall next to Mom's, peered in. Her old, wrinkled face was a mask of fear. She saw me. "Ava, your brother. Diego, he said you were here." Behind her, 2 more people. Mr. Pettit, who sells andouille sausage, and then 3 more, the 2 Saint sisters, who weave palmetto baskets. Within 30 seconds, the front of the restaurant was full. It wasn't a mob. It was a delegation of the scared and the poor. And right in the middle was Diego, his face pale, pushing his way to the front. "Ava!" he yelled, relief washing over his face when he saw I was okay. "These men, the inspectors?" "They're right here, Diego," I said, my voice hard as steel. I pointed at Hansen and Pitts. "Mrs." Tran's eyes widened. She raised a trembling finger. "That's them. That's the men. They said they'd shut us down. They said the hurricane relief funds were processed wrong." "They took $50 from me, mister," Pettit shouted, his voice booming in the small space. "Said it was a fine." The 2 inspectors were surrounded. Their world had shrunk to a tiny, terrified point. This wasn't one scared waitress in a back alley. This was a dozen angry, frightened, public citizens. "This is a misunderstanding," Hansen squeaked, his voice several octaves higher. He was backing toward the door, pulling Pitts with him. "We'll have to check our paperwork back at the office," Pitts stammered, his clipboard held in front of him like a flimsy shield. Salvatore Mancini hadn't moved. He and his men were just watching. They weren't blocking the exit. They simply let the crowd of vendors part, creating a path. Hansen and Pitts scrambled for it. They ran, in his haste. Hansen fumbled with his ID clip, and something shiny and metallic clattered to the floor. His fake badge. He didn't even look back. They burst through the front door and vanished into the Royal Street night. The restaurant erupted in noise. Everyone was talking at once, scared, relieved, angry. Mancini walked over to the fallen badge, and he didn't pick it up. He just nudged it with the toe of his perfectly shined shoe, turning it over on the floorboards. Then he looked up. At me. The vendors were all talking, asking questions, crowding around Diego and Jules, but Mancini's gaze cut through all of it, silencing the noise in my head. He walked over to me, ignoring everyone else in the room. "You just lit a flare in a very dark room, Ava Quintana," he said, his voice so low only I could hear it. My heart was a fist, hammering against my ribs. "Those men will be back," he stated. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. "Not here. They'll go to your mother. They'll go to your brother. They'll go to your apartment. And they won't be wearing badges. There'll just be consequences." I stared at him, my throat closing. He was right. "You need to come with me," he said, "if you want your family to survive the night." I looked at him. This man, the shadow, the name I'd whispered, he had just saved us. Or had he just claimed us? Pride, stubborn and fierce, rose up. I can't. My family, I have to. As if summoned, my phone rang. The sound was shrill, cutting through the chatter. I dug it from my apron pocket. The screen read Diego. But Diego was standing right in front of me, his face a mask of confusion. I looked at my brother. "It's your phone," I said, my mind struggling to catch up. He fumbled for his own. "No, it's yours." It was mine, ringing with his name. My blood turned to ice water. I answered it, my thumb shaking. Diego. It wasn't him. The voice on the other end was distorted, synthesized, like it was coming through a cheap voice changer. "Was that you, pretty girl, at the restaurant, you and your little mob?" It was one of them, Hanson or Pitts. "You think you're smart," the voice rasped, laughing a wet, ugly sound. "You think your new boyfriend scares us? You don't know who you're messing with." "What do you want?" I whispered. "We know where your mother lives, Ava. We know where your brother sleeps. We're coming back tonight to collect what we're owed, and a little extra for the trouble you caused." The line clicked dead. I stood there, staring at the black screen. I looked up at Salvatore Mancini. His gray eyes were unreadable, but he knew. He had seen it on my face. He had read the terror. He didn't have to hear a single word. The choice I thought I had was gone. It had never been there at all. "All right," I said. My voice was a thread, but I forced it to be steady. "I'll go." I looked at Diego, at Mrs. Tran, at the faces of my mother's friends. Then I looked back at the man who held all the cards. "But I'm doing this for them, for my family." I lifted my chin. "Not for you." Salvatore Mancini allowed himself that same fleeting shadow of a smile. "That," he said, "is a good enough reason to start." The phone call ended, but the dead, synthetic echo of the man's voice, "We're coming back tonight," stayed in the air. I was frozen, my knuckles white on the plastic shell of my phone. Diego rushed forward, his face a mess of confusion and fear. "Ava! What is it? Who was that?" I couldn't answer. I looked past him. The vendors were all talking, a frantic buzz of fear and anger. Jules was leaning against the bar, breathing into a paper bag. The entire fragile ecosystem of our lives had just been ripped open. Salvatore Mancini hadn't moved. He was just watching me, his gray eyes absorbing my terror. He knew. He didn't need to hear the words. "Silas," he said, his voice quiet but cutting through the chaos. The tall, thin man who had disarmed Rico was instantly at his side. "Take Mr. Quintana," Salvatore gestured to Diego, "and the rest of them through the kitchens. Use the upstairs storage room. Stay with them until I call. Nobody leaves. Nobody makes a call." "What?" Diego yelled, stepping back. "I'm not going anywhere without my sister Ava. What's going on?" I finally found my voice. It was a scraped, hollow sound. "Diego, you have to. They threatened Mom. That was them. They said they're coming to the house tonight. You can't be there." His face went white. Silas and two other men who had materialized from the shadows of the back room, began to gently but irresistibly herd the vendors toward the kitchen doors. This way, folks, we'll keep you safe." But my stall misses. Tran started to cry. "Your stall is just wood, ma'am," Silas said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Let's worry about you." Diego looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Ava!" "Go with them," I commanded, forcing a strength I didn't feel. "Be strong. Keep them calm. I have to fix this." Salvatore put a hand on my elbow. It wasn't a grab, not like the tourists, and not a threat, not like Rico's. It was just a firm, undeniable pressure. "Now, Miss Quintana." He didn't lead me to the front door. He led me back through the swinging doors of the kitchen. The kitchen staff, who'd been hiding behind the steel prep tables, flattened themselves against the walls as we passed. The air was thick with the smell of scorched garlic and shrimp stock. He pushed open the heavy steel emergency exit, and we were out. We were in a narrow, dark alleyway. The air, thick and humid, smelled of wet garbage and stale beer. The rain had started again, a fine, warm mist. "This way." He didn't take me to the black sedans parked out front. He led me down the alley to a cross street, where a single car was parked under a flickering gas lamp. It was a classic, something from the 50s. Maybe a Chevrolet Bel Air. It was impossibly black, gleaming like polished obsidian under the misty light, the chrome reflecting the damp street. He opened the passenger door. I hesitated. This was the moment. This was the line. I could scream, I could run, and those men would go to my mother's house. I got in. The door closed with a heavy, solid thunk, the sound of the city, the distant jazz, the shouting. It was all muffled, sealed away. The inside of the car smelled of old, perfectly conditioned leather, a faint trace of his whiskey, and something clean, like cedar. He got in the driver's side and turned the key. The engine didn't roar to life. It rumbled, a low, deep vibration that I felt in my chest. He pulled away from the curb, his movements economical and smooth. We didn't talk. The silence in the car was heavier than the humid air outside, thick and charged. I stared out the window, my reflection a pale ghost superimposed over the blurring city. New Orleans at night, in the rain, is a different animal. We crossed the streetcar tracks on Canal, the tires making a soft, rhythmic thump-thump. The neon signs of the French Quarter weren't charming. They were bleeding. Purple and green and red light ran across the wet asphalt like spilled ink, like the city's veins were open and exposed. I watched the wrought iron balconies slide past, their intricate shadows like spider webs on the slick pavement. I was Eva Quintana. I was a waitress, wearing a uniform that smelled faintly of spilled whiskey, clutching a phone with a threatening message. I had $23 to my name, and I was sitting on leather that probably cost more than my mother's medical bills for the entire year, next to a man whose name was a ghost story. We left the quarter, heading toward the industrial sector, down by the water. The streets grew dark, the gas lamps replaced by buzzing, inconsistent streetlights. The smell of bourbon and perfume gave way to the smell of the Mississippi damp earth, diesel fuel, and a faint, sweet rot. He pulled up to a massive corrugated metal building that loomed over the riverbank. The paint on the side was so faded you could barely read it. Warehouse 47. It looked abandoned, condemned. The windows were boarded up, and rust crept down the metal siding like dried blood. He didn't get out. He just aimed a small, black remote at the wall, and a 10-foot section of the rusted metal slid upward, silent and smooth as silk, revealing a dark, concrete ramp. He drove us inside. The door slid shut behind us, cutting off the last of the city, sealing us in. My eyes adjusted to the dim light. This wasn't a warehouse. It was impossible. We were in a vast, cavernous space, part high-end art gallery, part something else, massive. Disturbing sculptures made of salvaged metal and driftwood stood under dramatic spotlights, casting shadows that stretched 50 feet long. But in the spaces between the art, the real business was happening. Banks of glowing computer screens were set into the walls. Men in crisp shirt sleeves, some with headsets, moved with quiet, focused purpose. And dominating the far wall was a massive, backlit map. It wasn't a map of New Orleans. It was a map of the port, of the Gulf of Mexico, with shipping lanes and container routes glowing in soft green lines. The air smelled of river water, old coffee, and the sharp, clean scent of ozone from the electronics. Silas was already there, as if he had materialized through the walls. He was waiting by my door as Salvatore opened it. He held out a dark, heavy wool coat. "You're soaked, miss," he said. His voice was flat. My uniform was damp and cold from the rain. My hands were shaking. I let my waitress apron fall to the floor and took the coat, pulling it around me. The lining was silk, and it was warm. It smelled faintly of that same cedar from the car. I wasn't looking at Silas. I was looking at the map. "What is this?" "Logistics," Salvatore said, walking past me toward the main bank of screens. "This city doesn't run on tourism. It runs on what moves through that river." He was right. Next to the shipping map, I saw them. Tide charts, water depth tables for the river channels. It was the nerve center of an organization that didn't just own things, it moved things. "You were right," Salvatore said. His voice clipped. He tapped a key on a console, and one of the largest screens on the wall flickered to life. My breath caught. It was security footage, time-stamped this morning, from the Bywater Market. I saw Mrs. Trans Bakery stall. I saw Mr. Petit's sign for Andouille, and I saw my mother. She was standing there, her hands fluttering nervously as she talked to them. "Paunchy and Weasel, the inspectors." "Hansen and Pitts," I whispered, the names from the fake badges burning in my throat. Salvatore ignored me. He used a trackball to pause the video, then zoomed in. The image was grainy, but it held. It was a tight shot of Hansen, the paunchy one, as he leaned over Mom's counter, gesturing angrily, his cheap polyester collar pulled away from his neck. And there, just below his ear, peeking out, was a tattoo. It was small, precise, a black and yellow honeycomb. "The Port Hive," Silas said, stepping up beside his boss. His face was grim. "They're small-time, ambitious but sloppy. They usually stick to cargo theft, hijacking containers. This shaking down vendors is beneath them. Or it used to be." I stared at the honeycomb. I thought back to the restaurant, to the fear in the vendors' faces, to the words that had been spoken. "Mrs. Tran," I said, thinking aloud, my voice echoing slightly in the huge space. "She said they mentioned the hurricane relief funds, that the processing was wrong." I turned to look at Salvatore. His back was to me, but I knew he was listening. "This isn't about the vendors. Not really. The $50 from Mr. Pettit, the threats to my mom, that's just noise. This is about the hurricane aid. Isn't it the relief money?" Salvatore turned around slowly. His gray eyes were analytical, all emotion wiped clean. "The Urban Commerce Bureau is a fence," he stated, as if teaching a class. "The Port Hive provides the muscle. They create a problem, invalid permits, safety violations, code infractions. They use that to leverage fake bids for city contracts. Hurricane cleanup, debris removal, public sanitation." He took a step toward me. "They aren't just taking $50 from a sausage vendor, Ava. They are steering millions in federal aid away from families like your mother and into their own pockets." The cold panic that had lived in my stomach for an hour began to change. It started to burn. This wasn't just a shakedown. This wasn't just my family being threatened. This was theft. This was a parasite feeding on the city's weakest. "The invoices," I said. Salvatore tilted his head. "What?" "The invoices, if they're steering contracts, they're filing invoices. They have to be fake invoices from a fake company, approved by someone on the inside. They must be electronic." I stepped forward toward the console, drawn by the numbers. "I can find them." Silas let out a short, incredulous huff. "Boss, with all due respect, we have people for this. This isn't her concern." I spun on him, the heavy wool coat flaring around me. "Your people look for bullets. I look for decimals. I spent 2 years in the finance program at Tulane before I had to drop out. I did part-time accounts receivable for a shipping logistics firm for a year to pay for things. I gestured at the screen. I know how to read a ledger. I know how to spot a ghost. I looked at Salvatore. You're looking for the muscle. I can find the money. Let me look. Silas opened his mouth to protest, but Salvatore raised a hand. He just watched me. For a long, silent 10 seconds, he was weighing me. The waitress was gone. He was seeing the desperate finance student, the girl who knew decimals. He nodded, not to me, but to Silas. Give her access. Silas looked like he had just swallowed a wasp. Boss, the system, the city database, it's firewalled. Now, Silas, Salvatore said, his voice flat. It was not a request. Grumbling, Silas stalked over to a smaller, secondary terminal. He typed for a moment, his fingers flying, and then stepped back. It's open. You have a 30-minute window before the Port Authority system pings the intrusion. I didn't care. I sat down. The chair was leather, ergonomic. I pushed the sleeves of the heavy coat up my arms. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. This, I understood. The numbers wouldn't lie. I dove in. I didn't search for Urban Commerce Bureau. That was a ghost. I searched for city disbursements related to the Bywater Market District. Cross-referencing permits, I found them. Mrs. Tran, Mr. Pettit, my mother, Elena Quintana, and I found the payments. Here, I whispered. I pointed to a string of payments. Public sanitation, emergency debris removal, structural assessment, and all paid out to the same vendor, a vendor I'd never heard of. Gulf Renewal Partners. A shell, Salvatore said. His voice was right behind me. I jumped. I hadn't heard him move. The address is a post office box in Metairie, I said, my fingers flying. The invoices, they're all identical. Round numbers, 10,000 here, 25,000, 50,000, all approved by the same city clerk. Who? Myrtle Kane, I read, director of the Swampland Restoration Committee. So, Salvatore said, the pieces clicking into place. The Port Hive provides the muscle on the street. Kane provides the signature from inside the city. And Gulf Renewal Partners provides the laundry. Where does the money go? Silas asked, leaning in, his skepticism forgotten. I tracked the disbursements. The funds went from the city account to a standard commercial bank, but they didn't stay. They were transferred out, same day, to an offshore account. And from there, it's a digital wallet, I whispered, stunned. A crypto account? They're washing it clean, instantly. As I said it, an alert flashed on the main screen. A red dot began to pulse on the city map. Silas pointed. Boss, that wallet, it just became active. A transaction is pending. It's pinging a terminal on the water. The river's lantern, Salvatore said, his voice hard. The riverboat casino. I breathed, the anger flaring into a hot, white rage. They were gambling. They were sitting on a boat, drinking and gambling with my mother's medicine money, with Mrs. Tran's rent. I gripped the edge of the console, my knuckles white. They'll be there tomorrow night. Salvatore looked at me. He wasn't looking at a waitress anymore. He was looking at a weapon. Yes, he said. His voice was soft again, but it held the unyielding hardness of steel. They'll be there. He stepped back, taking in the full picture the rumpled girl in the borrowed coat, standing at a console in his secret war room. And you won't be going as a waitress, he said. You won't be going as prey. You'll be going as someone they wouldn't dare to touch. The drive from the warehouse was a blur of dark, wet streets. We didn't talk. The only sound was the rhythmic slap, slap, slap of the windshield wipers, pushing away the last of the drizzle. I was still wearing his coat, a heavy wool shell that felt like armor, insulating me from the world I knew. My waitress uniform, damp and smelling of spilled whiskey, was still underneath. I felt like a child playing dress-up in a very dangerous adult's closet. I had left my apron, with my $23 and my house keys, on the floor of that warehouse. I was untethered. He didn't take me to a hotel or some glittering high-rise. He drove into the Marigny, The neighborhood of old Creole cottages and quiet, jasmine-choked streets that ran alongside the quarter. He pulled the big Chevy into a dark, private carriageway, the iron gate sighing shut behind us, cutting off the street. The penthouse wasn't what I expected. It was an attic, a garret, really, taking up the entire top floor of an old 3-story brick building. He unlocked a heavy wooden door, and we stepped inside. It was one large room, with exposed brick walls, dark-stained wooden floors, and a ceiling slanted high with ancient cypress beams. It wasn't opulent, there was no gold, no marble, it was just solid. A long, worn leather couch faced a fireplace. An old-fashioned phonograph stood in the corner. The windows were covered by faded, deep blue shutters, closed tight against the night. It felt less like a safe house and more like a private sanctuary, a place that had existed out of time for 100 years. Salvatore flicked on a single, low-wattage lamp, which cast a warm, amber glow over the room. "Silas has moved your family," he said. His voice quiet in the stillness, he shrugged off his own suit jacket, hanging it on a wooden peg by the door. "They're at a diocesan house in Algiers. Your mother is with your brother. They are safe. No one will find them." I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. The knot of fear that had been clenched in my chest since Diego's first text finally eased. Just a fraction. "I need to call them," I whispered. He pulled a sleek, thin burner phone from a drawer and handed it to me. "This line is clean. They'll be waiting for your call." I walked to the far side of the room, near the closed shutters, turning my back to him. My fingers fumbled on the unfamiliar keypad as I dialed Diego's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with panic. "Ava! Oh my God, Ava, are you okay? Who was that man? Where did you go?" "I'm fine, Diego," I said, forcing my voice to be calm, smooth. "I'm okay. Are you with Mom?" Yeah, this tall, scary guy. Silas, he moved us. We're in a church or something. Mom's scared. I'm scared. Ava, what is going on?" I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the cool, painted wood of the shutter. "Listen to me. It's fine. It's a misunderstanding. Those men from the market, they were frauds. I'm with someone who is helping us, a client from the restaurant. He's very powerful, and he's fixing it." The lie felt thick and slimy in my mouth. "I have to go. Diego, stay with Mom. Don't leave that building. Don't talk to anyone. I'll call you tomorrow. I love you." I hung up before he could ask any more questions. I stood there for a long time, just breathing, my shoulder blades tense. "She believed you." His voice came from across the room. I turned. He was in the small, open kitchen area, not looking at me. He was giving me the illusion of privacy. He had a small, metal filter of Vietnamese fin propped over a glass. He was slowly pouring hot water over the dark grounds, his movements measured. Economical? I noticed his hands. They were steady. Not a tremor. These were not the nervous, damp hands of Jules or the grabbing, clumsy hands of the tourist. They were the hands of a man who was in complete control. Whether he was setting down a whiskey glass in a silent room or making coffee, I found myself wondering, just for a second, what those hands would feel like if they weren't in control. I pushed the thought away, horrified. He finished pouring, and the coffee began to drip, slow and black, into the glass below. "You're a good liar," he said, still not looking at me, "but you're a bad actor. Your shoulders were halfway to your ears." I said nothing, just pulled his coat tighter around me. "You need to change," he said. He nodded toward a door. "There are clothes in the armoire. They'll be functional." He didn't say who they belonged to. I didn't ask. I went into the bedroom. It was simple. Just a bed with a white coverlet and an old dark wood armoire. Inside, there weren't dresses. There were black slacks, several white silk blouses, and a pair of flat, soft leather shoes. Anonymous, clean. The uniform of a person who needed to disappear. I peeled off my damp Waitress uniform, the last relic of my old life, and left it in a heap on the floor. I pulled on the silk blouse. It was cool against my skin. The pants were a perfect fit, which was unsettling. When I came back out, he had 2 glasses of coffee, thick and black, on the low table. He pushed one toward me and sat on the couch, leaving the armchair for me. He maintained the distance. He didn't touch me. He didn't crowd me. "The rain has stopped," he said, sipping his coffee. I sat in the armchair, the hot glass warming my cold hands. What now? What happens at the river's lantern? "Now," he said, setting the glass down, "we rehearse." For the next 2 hours, the attic in the Marigny became a classroom. "You are not Ava Quintana," he said, pacing the room. "You are a risk consultant. I've flown you in from New York. You analyze exposure for my investments. You are expensive, you are brilliant, and you are, above all, bored. Nothing impresses you." "I don't know how to be those things," I said, my voice small. "You knew how to read that ledger," he countered. "That's all that matters. They are arrogant. They think they are the only smart ones in the room. You will use their arrogance against them." He taught me his world. "You never enter a room all at once," he instructed. He made me stand at the bedroom door. "You pause. You scan. You are not looking for people. You are looking for exits. Not just the marked ones, service hallways, kitchen doors, windows that open onto a lower roof. You find your escape route before you ever take a seat." I walk the room, my eyes seeing it differently. The window over the desk leads to the fire escape. The pantry door, it connects to the main stairwell, not just the kitchen. "Good," he said, a flicker of approval in his eyes. In turn, I taught him mine. "They're thieves, not accountants," I said, leaning over the table, the old tension from the warehouse returning. But this time it was focused, sharp. They won't have 2 sets of books. They'll hide the money in plain sight. They won't have a line item that says bribe. They'll inflate the cost of goods. They'll have consulting fees paid to shell companies. They'll have contingency budgets that are, say, 20% higher than industry standard. I tap the table. You look for the numbers that are too round, 10,000, 50,000. Real business is messy. It's $9,418.05. They're lazy. I can find the flavor of the fraud. He watched me, his expression unreadable. "You'll need a signal," he said, his voice softer. He went to a small, carved wooden box on the mantelpiece. "If you're in trouble, or if you've found what we need." He opened it. It wasn't a gun, it wasn't a knife, and it was a necklace. It was simple, almost severe, a thin, silver chain with a single smooth piece of dark stone, maybe obsidian. "Touch the stone, just rest your fingers on it. That means you're compromised, and Silas will pull the fire alarm. Tap it twice like this if you have the data. If you're in the system." I nodded. "Okay." "Turn around." I turned, pulling my hair to the side. I felt him step behind me. The air in the room changed, became thick, charged. I felt the cool, light weight of the silver settle against my skin. His fingers brushed the nape of my neck as he worked the clasp. I drew in a sharp, sudden breath. His fingers stilled. They weren't just touching the clasp. His knuckles were resting against my skin, just above my collarbone. I could feel the warmth of him, the sheer presence of him right behind me. A shiver, tiny and uncontrollable, ran straight down my spine. He felt it. I know he did. He didn't move. He didn't pull away. For 1, 2, 3 seconds, we just stood there, frozen, his hand on my neck, my breath caught in my throat. The silence of the attic was roaring in my ears. Then the clasp clicked shut. He stepped back. The boundary was restored, but the air was vibrating, like a plucked string. I turned around, my hand instinctively going to the stone. It was cool against my suddenly hot skin. "The silence," I said, my voice sounding shaky. I needed to break the spell. "It's too quiet. It makes me nervous." I walked over to the old phonograph in the corner, needing something to do with my hands. I fumbled through the stack of records beside it. They were all jazz, classical, and bossa nova. I pulled one out and, my hands trembling slightly, settled the needle into the groove. A soft, brushing sound, and then music. A guitar, a soft percussion, a woman's voice singing in Portuguese. The sound was thin, intimate, and it wrapped the room in a layer of melancholy. I turned back. He was holding something else. A tiny microphone, the size of a shirt button, with a thin wire and a small, black transmitter pack. "This is for Silas, Nat," he said. "He'll be our ears. He'll be in the security room of the casino." This time, I didn't turn around. I just lifted my chin. He had to come to me. He stepped close, closer than necessary. The music was playing. I could smell the coffee on his breath and that sharp, clean scent of cedar. He reached up, his movements precise, and clipped the tiny microphone to the placket of my silk blouse, right between my breasts. My heart was hammering. I was sure he could hear it, even without the microphone. His eyes were fixed on his task, his dark eyelashes casting shadows on his high cheekbones. "The pack goes here," he murmured, his voice a low vibration. His hand, the steady hand, moved to my waist. He gently tucked the transmitter pack into the waistband of my slacks, at the small of my back. His fingers brushed the bare skin of my hip as he settled it. It wasn't a caress. It was functional. It was a million miles from romantic. But it was contact, deliberate. His hand was warm. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. We were standing in the middle of the room, wrapped in Brazilian music, close enough to kiss, but what we were doing was the furthest thing from it. "The microphone is hot," he whispered, his head near mine. He stepped away. The separation felt as violent as a physical blow. The music rushed in to fill the space he had occupied. He walked to the window, pushing open one of the heavy blue shutters. The night, or what was left of it, bled in. The sky was turning a deep, bruised purple. "My name," he said, his back to me. "You said it. In the restaurant." I froze. I'm sorry, it slipped out." "Don't," he said, his voice flat. "Don't ever say it again, not in public. Not when anyone can hear." I clutched my hands together. I only remembered it because of an old newspaper clipping. Years ago, there was a fire. In the Trime, a family, they lost everything. They couldn't afford the burial for their little boy. He was perfectly still, a silhouette against the coming dawn. A few days later, I continued, my voice barely a whisper. The paper ran a small follow-up. An anonymous donor had paid for everything, the caskets, the funeral, the headstones. A reporter got the name from a source at the funeral home, Salvatore Mancini. I looked at his rigid back. I just thought a man who would do that, he couldn't be entirely a devil. He turned. Slowly. His face was a mask, but his eyes, those gray eyes, weren't cold. They were something else, something raw. He had been seen. Not the boss, not the ghost, the man. The silence in the room was absolute. The record player had finished, the needle hissing softly in the final groove. The air between us was so tight I thought it might shatter. We stood there, on opposite sides of the room, in the gray dawn, the line between us burning bright and hot. I broke the spell. I should get some rest, if I'm going to be a risk consultant. He nodded, the mask sliding back into place. The bedroom is yours. And you? I'll be on the couch, he said. I went into the bedroom and closed the door, but I didn't lock it. I lay on top of the white coverlet, still wearing his necklace. I didn't sleep. I just listened to the sounds of the old house, tracing the silver chain with my fingertips. I knew he was out there. I knew he was awake, too. Both of us, in the dark, wide awake, waiting for the night to end. Hours passed. The light in the room had just turned from gray to a pale, watery gold when the phone on the nightstand vibrated. It wasn't a call. It was a text. It was from the clean phone, from the number Silas had for Diego. I opened it. Ava, I'm sorry to text. Mom is asleep, but there's a car, a dark sedan. It's parked across the street from our house. It's been there for at least an hour. I can see it from the window here. My blood went cold. They hadn't gone to the safe house. They had gone to our house. They were watching, waiting for us to come home. I scrambled off the bed, pulling his wool coat on over my new, Anonymous clothes. I walked out of the bedroom. He wasn't on the couch. He was standing at the window, the shutters now wide open, watching the sun rise over the Marigny. He was already dressed. He had never slept at all. I didn't have to say anything. I just walked up and held out the phone. He read the text. His face, which had been calm in the morning light, hardened into granite. "So it begins," he said. The text message from Diego hung in the garret's dawn light. A digital death warrant. There's a car. It's been there for at least an hour. Salvatore read the text. He didn't flinch. His face, which had been calm in the sunrise, settled into something hard and final. "They're impatient," he said, his voice flat. "Good." He picked up his own phone. It wasn't to Silas. He made a call that lasted less than 10 seconds. "The Dauphine Street location is burned. Activate the Bywater League. Move them now." He hung up. He looked at me, his gray eyes pinning me in place. "Your family is being moved again, to an old church in Algiers, one that was flooded in the storm. It's a soup kitchen now, run by the Bayou Justice League. It's neutral ground. Even the port hive won't touch a place that feeds the hungry. Not publicly. Anyway, they are safe." For the second time, that tight knot of fear in my chest eased. Just a fraction. He had thought of it before I even finished the text. The day was a long, anxious blur. I didn't see the sun. I paced the attic, the bossa nova record playing over and over, the only sound besides my own heartbeat. Salvatore sat in the armchair, perfectly still, for hours. I don't know if he was sleeping or meditating or planning. He just was. Around 3 o'clock, Silas let himself in, and he didn't knock. He carried a single, long garment bag. He didn't bring it to Salvatore. He brought it to me. "This is for a Q," he said, his face impassive. Inside was not the anonymous uniform from the night before. It was a dress. It was made of heavy, dark green silk, so dark it was almost black. It was severe, a high neckline, sleeveless, falling in a straight, unforgiving line to my knees. It was the kind of dress that cost more than my car, and it was designed to be ignored, to make the woman wearing it look like a tool, a functionary. An hour later, I was transformed. My hair was pulled back into a tight, severe bun at the nape of my neck, a style that pulled my eyes taut. I wore the simple, flat shoes. When I looked in the mirror, Ava Quintana, the waitress with the $23, was gone. In her place was A.Q., the risk consultant, a woman who looked cold, expensive, and bored. When I walked out, Salvatore was ready. He too had changed. The white shirt was gone, replaced by a dark, charcoal gray suit, tailored so perfectly it looked like a second skin, no tie. He looked less like a gangster and more like what he was pretending to be, a silent, powerful investor. He held out his hand. In it was a tiny, flesh-colored earpiece. "Silas Wantan," he said, "he will be in your ear. He will be your shadow. I will be your cover." I put the piece in my ear. It was cold. I heard a faint shh of static, and then Silas's voice, flat and disembodied. "Testing. 1, 2. I read you. Don't talk. I just listen." My heart began to hammer. This was real. We didn't take the Chevy Bel Air. Silas drove us in a sleek black sedan that was indistinguishable from every other luxury car in the city. He drove us to the docks near the convention center, where the river's lantern was moored. It was a monstrosity, a 3-tiered riverboat painted in gaudy white and gold, lit up like a diseased Christmas tree. It was a permanent fixture on the riverbank, a trap for tourists and locals with bad judgment. As we walked up the gangplank, the smell hit me the river's damp mud, stale beer, cheap perfume, and the electric tang of desperation. Inside, a loud, frantic swing band was playing, the horns straining. The main floor was a sea of slot machines and felt tables. It was a perfect cross-section of the city tourists in shorts and fanny packs, losing $20 bills, local politicians in seersucker suits, glad-handing by the bar, and men who looked like the port hive thick-necked, in shiny suits, their eyes constantly moving. Salvatore moved through the crowd like a shark, parting it without touching anyone. He led me to a small, raised table near the high-stakes poker room. It had a clear view of the main floor and, more importantly, the grand, carpeted staircase that led to the VIP decks. A waitress in a scandalously short uniform came over. Salvatore ordered a bottle of Sazerac. The price on the menu was $800. He didn't look at it. He pushed a single $100 chip across the table for her. Just the bottle and 2 glasses of water. He didn't drink. I sipped my water, the tiny earpiece buzzing faintly. The ice in my glass rattled against my teeth. "Breathe," Salvatore murmured, not looking at me. "You're bored. Remember, this place is beneath you." We waited. For 45 minutes, my nerves were shredding. "He's not coming," I whispered, my hand straying to the obsidian necklace he'd given me. "He's not late," Salvatore said, his eyes on the staircase. "He's making an entrance." And just like that, he was there. Rico Sal. I had only seen him on the grainy warehouse footage, the man with the honeycomb tattoo. In person, he was shorter than I expected, thick-set, with the barrel-chested build of a bulldog. He wore a suit that was too shiny and too tight, the color of a bad bruise. He was flanked by 3 men, including one with a face so sharp and angular he looked like he'd been carved from a piece of wood. I mentally dubbed him Hatchet Face. Rico was loud. He was laughing, a braying, obnoxious sound. Slapping the pit boss on the back, he and his crew sat 2 tables away from us, ordering a tray of colorful, sugary-looking drinks. This was my cue. I leaned in toward Salvatore, pitching my voice just loud enough to cut through the din of the swing band. "This is a waste of time. The storm loss reports are a complete liability." Rico's laughter, mid-bray, cut off. I felt the heat of his gaze lock onto our table. I kept going, my voice sharp with feigned annoyance. "The exposure on the Gulf Renewal account is amateur hour. It's a clear accounting violation, and the SEC would have a field day with it." Salvatore played his part perfectly. He held up a hand. Q, please, keep your voice down. We're supposed to be relaxing." "I don't relax when I see a 20% variance on disbursement," I snapped. "It's sloppy, and it's traceable. It's putting your entire investment at risk." Rico Sal was staring openly now. He knew those words: Gulf Renewal, storm loss. He said something to one of his men, who got up and walked over to our table. The man was huge, a wall of cheap suit. "Mr. Sal is curious why you're discussing his business." Salvatore looked up, his expression one of pure, bored indifference. "I believe you're mistaken. My consultant was just complaining about her job, as usual." Rico, his curiosity piqued, lumbered over, pushing his man aside. No, I heard her. Gulf Renewal. Storm loss. That's my business, lady. Who the hell are you?" I cut in before Salvatore could speak. I gave Rico a cold, appraising look, from his shiny shoes to his thinning hair. "I'm Q, risk analysis, and you're Rico Sal, the man behind Gulf Renewal Partners." His face darkened, but I saw a flicker of pride in his piggish eyes. He liked being known. He liked being seen as a man behind things. "You're smart," he said, a greasy smile spreading across his face. "I like smart. I don't like people talking about my business. Come upstairs. VIP deck. We need to talk. You and me." I looked at Salvatore, the picture of a subordinate asking for permission. He gave a tiny, almost invisible nod. I stood up, sliding the silk dress over my hips. "Lead the way, Mr. Sal." The VIP deck was on the 3rd tier, a glassed-in bubble that looked out over the black, swirling water of the Mississippi. It was quiet. The noise of the casino floor just a distant thrum. Rico poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. I didn't touch mine. Hatchet Face stood by the only door, arms crossed. "So," Rico said, slumping into a velvet chair, "risk analysis. Tell me, what's my risk?" "You," I said flatly. "You're sloppy. The invoices are too clean. The numbers are too round. 10,000, 25,000. It's a neon sign that says fraud. Anyone with half a brain can see the pattern. He laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "We're protected, sweetheart, all the way to the top. This isn't some back alley game." He leaned in, pulling a worn leather wallet from his jacket. "You see this? We're not just us. We're sanctioned." He flashed a shiny gold badge. "Federal Integrity Agency," it read. "We're the good guys, sweetheart, cleaning up all that storm fraud." A Federal Integrity Agency. My God, they weren't even creative. It was a fictional agency for a fictional integrity. I leaned forward, widening my eyes, faking profound admiration. I had no idea. "Your federal—" As I leaned in, my left hand, clutching my phone in my lap, came up slightly. The camera lens was clear. Click. A tiny imperceptible vibration. I got the picture. The font on the word integrity was Times New Roman. A child could have faked it better. "Now you know," he said, smug, putting the badge away. "So, you're good with numbers. Huh. Look at this." He pulled a thick, folded document from his jacket. "New contract, peer maintenance. Up on the Pontchartrain? Tell me. Smart girl, am I exposed here?" My heart was hammering. This was it. I took the document. It was warm from his body. I opened it, scanning the lines of dense legalese. Costs, timelines, subcontractors, and in the top right corner, a faint, ultraviolet watermark, invisible to the naked eye. "This is very thorough," I murmured, stalling. As I turned to the second page, I let my right thumbnail, which Silas had painted with a clear UV reactive solution back at the Garrett press, down hard on the paper, right over the watermark. It was the signal. "Silas, I'm in the system." "It's standard," Rico shrugged, looking bored. Suddenly, I saw Hatchet Face by the door, stiffen. He'd been staring idly out the glass window at the dark river, but he wasn't looking at the river. He was looking at the reflection. He'd seen something. Silas must be moving on the deck below." Hatchet Face's hand twitched, moving toward the inside of his jacket. My blood went cold. "Rico," I started, my voice tight. "Shut up," Hatchet Face growled, his eyes fixed on the glass. The door to the VIP lounge hissed open. It wasn't Silas, it was Salvatore. He wasn't 3 tables back on the main floor. He was here. Hatchet Face spun, his hand coming out of his jacket, holding a dark, heavy-looking firearm. Salvatore didn't go for a weapon. He didn't pause. He moved inside the man's reach, fluid as smoke. He brought his right elbow up in a short, brutal arc that connected with the man's jaw. I heard a sickening, wet crack. At the exact same instant, Salvatore's left hand clamped down on the man's wrist, turning the weapon inward, away from us. Hatchet Face's eyes went wide with pure animal shock. He didn't make a sound. He didn't yell. He just folded. Salvatore lowered the unconscious body to the plush carpet, as if it weighed nothing, taking the firearm and slipping it into the waistband of his own trousers, all in one seamless, terrifyingly graceful motion. It had taken less than 2 seconds. Rico Sal was halfway out of his chair, his mouth open, his face the color of old oatmeal. What the hell? Salvatore straightened the cuff of his suit. He looked at Rico with that same bored expression. "His drink looked low," he said, his voice calm. "I was just checking in. He gestured to me. Don't let us interrupt. Please. A.Q. Continue analyzing the risk." I was shaking. My God. I looked back at the contract, forcing my eyes to focus. The microphone, clipped to the silk of my dress, felt like it was burning a hole in my chest. "The risk," I stammered, then caught myself. Bored, annoyed, cold. "The risk, Mr. Sal, is that this contract is garbage." "What?" Rico blustered, trying to regain his composure, his eyes flickering between me and the body on the floor. "This is a public bid," I said, tapping the paper, "but you're treating it like a private windfall. The bidding process for this, it has to be sealed. You can't possibly know these numbers, not unless you have someone inside the state procurement office." "I got everyone," Rico yelled, his ego stung, his voice cracking. "You don't have everyone." I pushed, baiting the hook. You can't. A secret bid like this I don't know you'd need a state senator to unseal it for you. Rico let out a loud, braying laugh. A state senator, you think too small, sweetheart. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, boozy whisper, forgetting the man on the floor, forgetting everything but his own pride. I don't need a senator. I own Senator Thompson. He unseals whatever I tell him to unseal. That's how the game is played. Got him! My hand went to my chest. I tapped the obsidian necklace. Twice. We have the data. The second my fingers left the stone, a new sound ripped through the boat. Whoop, whoop, whoop! A piercing electronic alarm and a calm, synthesized voice. Attention, attention, a safety violation has been detected on the main deck. Please remain calm. Rico scrambled to his feet. What is this? What's going on? Is it a raid? Before Salvatore could answer, the door to the lounge burst open again, this time. It wasn't one of ours. It was two legitimate Rivers Lantern security guards, their faces panicked. Sir, we have a chemical spill in the bilge. We have to evacuate the VIP deck. You come with us. Now. My man Rico pointed at the unconscious hatchet face. He's sleeping. We'll get him, the guard yelled. Panicked, he grabbed Rico by the arm, physically separating him from us, pulling him toward the main stairs. Hey, what about them? Rico pointed at Salvatore and me. Salvatore held up his black metal card. We have our own exit, he said coolly. Don't worry about us. The guards didn't care. They just wanted the VIPs out. They dragged Rico's cell out of the room, yelling into their radios. The alarm was still blaring. Salvatore grabbed my hand. His skin was warm, his grip like steel. Not that way. Kitchen. He didn't pull me to the main stairs. He pulled me to a side door marked staff only. He kicked it open. We were in a narrow steel hallway that smelled of fryer grease and bleach. We ran. Down a flight of rattling metal stairs, through the chaotic kitchen chefs and waiters yelling, confused by the alarm and out a side hatch. We burst out onto the dock. The cool, damp night air hit my face, shocking me. This way. We ran down the wooden gangplank. Silas was waiting by the black sedan, the engine already running, the door open. Salvatore shoved me into the back seat and slid in right behind me. Go. Silas hit the gas. The car's tires screeched on the wet pavement as we pulled away from the dock, leaving the Rivers Lantern behind, its lights flashing, its alarm still wailing uselessly into the night. I was breathing in huge, ragged gasps, the adrenaline making me lightheaded. I looked at Salvatore. He was sitting calmly, straightening his tie, as if he'd just come from a boring dinner. Our eyes met. In the dim dashboard lights, I saw it again. That tiny, dangerous shadow of a smile. He'd won. We'd won. Silas wasn't taking us to the main road. He cut the headlights and swerved onto a narrow, unpaved access road that ran parallel to the river, into the dark, industrial wasteland of the port. What's wrong? I asked, the adrenaline suddenly curdling into new fear. Why are we running? They weren't all on the boat, Silas said, his voice tense, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. Salvatore wasn't looking behind us. He was looking out the side window toward the black, churning water of the Mississippi. There, he said. I looked. At first, nothing. Just darkness, then a shape. Low to the water, moving fast, too fast. An airboat, its massive fan almost silent over the hum of our engine. It had no lights. It was pacing us. Whap, whap, whap! 3 sharp, clean sounds like a string of firecrackers. Shots, Silas growled, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The airboat was turning, its nose aiming right for the bank. Peating. A high-pitched metallic clang ricocheted through the car. A spiderweb crack appeared on the rear passenger window, inches from my head. Get down, Salvatore yelled. He didn't push me. He grabbed the front of my silk dress and my shoulder and pulled me, bodily, across the leather seat. He shoved me down onto the floorboards and covered me with his own body, a solid, heavy weight. I was crushed beneath him, My face pressed into the expensive wool of his suit. I could smell the cedar, the starch from his shirt, and the faint metallic tang of his own adrenaline. I couldn't breathe. Whap P-ting. Another shot hit the car, this one slamming into the doorframe right where I had been sitting. I was terrified, but the only thing I could feel, the only thing my brain could register, was the solid, heavy weight of his body shielding mine, and his heart. I could feel his heart hammering against my back, a frantic, powerful rhythm perfectly, terrifyingly in time with my own. The car fishtailed on the unpaved road, mud and gravel spraying, whap-pating. Another round slammed into the trunk. My face was pressed hard into the fabric of Salvatore's suit jacket, my world reduced to the scent of cedar, starch, and the smell of the river rising from the floor mats. His heart hammered against my back, a frantic, solid drumbeat that was the only real thing in the world. "Bank hard right," Salvatore yelled, his voice a low growl in my ear. The car lurched violently, throwing us against the door. Silas wasn't driving. He was aiming the car. He cranked the wheel, and the sedan slid sideways, crashing through a chain-link fence with a metallic scream that set my teeth on edge. We were off the access road, plunging into a maze of abandoned shipping containers and rusted-out skeletons of old machinery. The airboat couldn't follow. Its fan was too wide, its hull too fragile for this industrial graveyard. I heard its engine whine, a frustrated, angry sound, and then it faded, swallowed by the night and the river. Silas didn't slow down. He navigated the maze without lights, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, until he skidded to a stop inside the cavernous, dark shape of another building. The engine cut. Silence. The silence that descended was absolute, a thick, heavy blanket, broken only by three sounds: the tink-tink-tink of the cooling engine, the distant, mournful hoot of a barge on the Mississippi, and the ragged sound of my own breathing. Salvatore's weight was still on me, solid, heavy, and hot. For a moment, neither of us moved. We were just two heartbeats, trapped in the dark. "Are you hit?" he whispered, his voice rough. "No," I managed to say, my voice a squeak. "I'm okay." He shifted, his movements economical, and rolled off me. Cold air rushed in to fill the space where he had been. He was a shadow, sitting up on the seat, looking out the back window. "Silas," he said, his voice returning to its normal, calm command. "Secure the perimeter. Give us 1 hour. No contact unless it's critical." "Boss?" Silas's voice came from the front, equally low. The driver's door opened and closed with a soft, expensive thud. He was gone. We were alone. Salvatore opened his door, and the dim, watery light of the moon, filtering through the boathouse's grimy skylights, spilled in, out. We move away from the car. I fumbled for the door handle, my limbs feeling like jelly. The adrenaline had been the only thing holding me up, and now it was gone. Leaving behind a cold, shaking exhaustion, I stumbled out onto the uneven wooden floor. This place was ancient. It was an old boathouse, a repair shop from a bygone era. The air was thick with the smells of pine resin, mineral spirits, and damp. Old wood, in the gloom, I could see the skeletal ribs of half-finished wooden hulls, like the skeletons of great beasts. Rain, a warm, gentle mist, was drifting through a hole in the roof, landing on my skin. Salvatore was standing a few feet away, watching me. He had taken off his suit jacket and was checking the firearm he'd taken from Hatchet Face, his movements precise and mechanical. He ejected the clip, checked it, and slid it back with a sharp, metallic click. The sound echoed in the huge, empty space. I just stood there, shaking, my arms wrapped around my middle. The silk dress was cold and damp. He finished his inspection, slipped the weapon into the back of his waistband, and turned his full attention to me. His gray eyes scanned me, not like a man looking at a woman, but like an inspector checking for damage. "You're bleeding," he said. I looked down. I hadn't even felt it. My left arm. the one that had been closest to the window when the shot hit. A long, thin scratch ran from my elbow to my wrist, welling with dark droplets. It wasn't from a bullet. It was from the spider-webbed safety glass that had exploded inward. "It's just a scratch," I whispered, wiping at it with my hand, which only smeared the blood. He was in front of me in 2 strides. He didn't ask. He just took my arm, his grip firm but gentle. He pulled me toward a patch of faint moonlight, angling my arm to see the damage. He pulled a clean, white, folded handkerchief from his pocket. His other hand held my wrist. His thumb rested on my pulse point, and I knew he could feel the frantic bird-wing flutter of my heart. He said nothing, just gently, meticulously, blotted the blood from the cut. His touch was light, almost clinical, but the contrast between the cool night air and the warmth of his fingers on my skin was electric. I could feel the rough texture of his fingertips, the calluses. This was not the hand of a man who just signed papers. He was so close. I could smell the faint, clean scent of cedar and starch again, now mixed with the metallic tang of gunpowder. He was focused entirely on the cut, his dark eyelashes casting shadows on his face. My breathing hitched. "Does it hurt?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, his eyes still fixed on my arm. The question was so simple, so practical. It broke something in me. The terror of the last 2 days, the fear for my mother, the adrenaline of the chase, the intimacy of him shielding me in the car, it all swelled up in my throat. A choked, hysterical laugh escaped me. "Only," I whispered, my voice trembling, "when you stop looking." His hand stilled. Slowly, he raised his head. His gray eyes, now dark as slate in the moonlight, met mine. He wasn't looking at my arm anymore, and he was looking at me. The professional mask, the AQ persona was gone. I was just Ava, the terrified waitress standing in a silk dress in a ruined boathouse, and he was just Salvatore, the man who had just saved my life. The space between us was no longer a space. It was a connection, a wire pulled impossibly taut, vibrating with everything that hadn't been said, everything that had just happened. He said something I never expected. His voice was rough, raw. I don't let people be used as leverage. Not Rico, not anyone. It was an admission, a confession. He was telling me why he had put himself between me and that man, why he had come to the VIP room, why he had shielded me. My throat was tight. "Then don't," I whispered back, my voice fierce. "Make me into a piece of property." I was challenging him. I was telling him I wasn't his. I wasn't collateral. I was not a thing to be saved or owned. A flicker of something passed through his eyes. Surprise respect. He didn't argue. He didn't dominate. He did the last thing I expected. He took half a step back, breaking the contact. The loss of his touch was a physical ache. And then he held out his hand. It was just there, palm up, an offering, an invitation, not a command. He was giving me the choice he had taken from me in the restaurant, the choice I hadn't had in the car. He was giving it back. I looked at his hand, the steady hand that had made coffee, and the hand that had disarmed a man in the blink of an eye. My own hand was shaking, but I lifted it. I placed my palm in his. His fingers closed around mine, not in a grip, but in an acceptance. He didn't pull me to him. He just held my hand, and he waited. I was the one who took the step. I was the one who closed the distance. The kiss didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a clash. It was a slow, inevitable rising of the tide. I stepped into his space, and he met me halfway. My back found a thick, wooden support pillar, the old wood rough against the thin silk of my dress. My free hand, the one that wasn't bleeding, came up, my fingers splaying against the hard plane of his chest. I felt his heart, steady now, a slow, powerful beat beneath my palm. His other hand came up, not to my face, not to my hair, but to my shoulder, his fingers spreading wide, holding me as if to keep me from falling. His lips touched mine. It was warm and slow and tentative. It wasn't the kiss of a conqueror or a boss. It was a question. It was relief. It was the end of a very long, very terrifying day. I tasted the faint, bitter trace of the coffee he'd had hours ago, and the sharp, clean taste of the night air. The rain misted around us, a soft shh that blended with the sound of our breathing. My hand slid from his chest, up over his shoulder, my fingers tangling in the thick, dark hair at the nape of his neck. He deepened the kiss, a low sound vibrating in his chest. It was still slow, still deep, a discovery. It wasn't about power. It was about grounding. We were two people, alive, in the dark. We spoke in whispers, our faces close, our breath mingling. "The docks," he murmured, his lips brushing my temple. "I used to hide on them when I was a boy, steal beignets from the morning carts. I knew every splintered board." I felt a crack open in his armor. I gave him a piece of my own. My father, he left, just walked out. My mother, she worked 3 jobs. She taught me how to read a ledger. She said, "Numbers don't lie. Ava, people do. Trust the numbers." A profound softness bloomed between us. In the dark, in the smell of pine and rain. He wasn't the ghost story. I wasn't the victim. We were just two people, built from the same New Orleans mud. He pulled back, just enough to look at me. His hands framed my face, his thumbs brushing the high arches of my cheekbones. His gray eyes were clear, and in them, I saw an intensity that frightened and thrilled me. He leaned his forehead against mine. Our breaths were one. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his voice thick. "Ava, tell me to stop, and I will." He was giving me the choice again, the final one. My heart was doing a slow, painful roll in my chest. I was terrified, but not of him. I was terrified of what I was feeling. I didn't answer in words. I just smiled, a small, shaky, tear-filled smile. And I pulled him back to me. This time, it wasn't a question, it was an answer. The intensity flared. It was a fire, but it was a warm one, not a burning one. His mouth was on mine, and then on my jaw, my throat, the sensitive place just below my ear. My head fell back against the wooden pillar, and I arched into his touch. His hands were in my hair, pulling the pins free, letting it fall, heavy and loose, over my shoulders. His jacket, which I hadn't even realized he'd picked up, slid from his arm and around my shoulders, a heavy, warm cocoon of wool and cedar. He pulled me into him. One arm wrapped tight around my waist, the other still tangled in my hair, holding my face to his. We didn't fall. We sank, down against the pillar onto a pile of old, dry canvas sails. He never broke the contact. His jacket was a blanket, a shield. His body was a furnace against mine. His lips found the pulse in my throat, and I gasped, my fingers clutching his shirt. The world was spinning, all sensation, all warmth, all him. It was the heat of his skin through the thin cotton of his shirt, the rasp of his stubble against my cheek, the solid, undeniable rightness of his weight holding me down, keeping me safe. It was the whisper of his breath, the clasp of his hand, the slide of silk and wool. It was everything, and it was just enough. Later, I don't know how much later, we were lying side by side on the canvas, the jacket still draped over both of us. The rain had slowed. The boathouse was silent again. He was propped on one elbow, looking down at me. His hair was a mess. His shirt was untucked. He looked real. He didn't speak. He just leaned down and pressed a long, slow kiss to my forehead, a promise, a statement. And in that moment, in the absolute quiet, a phone vibrated. It wasn't mine. It was his. He sat up, the spell broken. He pulled the phone from his pocket. The screen cast a blue, clinical light on his face, hardening it again, pulling the boss, the Mancini, back to the surface. He listened. Yes. Silas. What? Send it. Now. He hung up, his face grim. A second later, his phone buzzed with an incoming file. He opened it. "What is it?" I asked, sitting up, pulling the jacket tight around me. He didn't answer. He just held the phone out so I could see. It was a video, shaky, taken from a distance. It was dark, but I recognized the location. It was the Bywater Market, no. It was the warehouse behind the market, the one that belonged to the Swampland Restoration Committee. I saw a large white container truck, the kind used for shipping, and I saw men, dressed in the dark work clothes of the port hive, unloading wooden crates. "That's Diego's footage," I whispered, my blood running cold. He went back. "He sent it to Silas," Salvatore said, his voice hard. "He's safe, but look." He zoomed in on the side of the truck. Faded but still visible was the logo of the Urban Commerce Bureau. They weren't just stealing money. They were moving something, physical goods. I looked at Salvatore, the softness of the last hour evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I grabbed his hand, not the one he had offered me, but the one holding the phone. "We aren't just saving my family," I said, my voice low and fierce. "We have to expose all of them, from the bottom to the top." Salvatore looked down at our joined hands. Then he looked up. His gray eyes locking with mine, he nodded. "Once. From the second you said my name in that room, Ava," he said, his voice flat. "Absolute. We were on the same side." The drive back from the lower Ninth Ward was silent, but it was a different silence. It wasn't the charged, terrifying void of the previous night. It was the quiet of two people who had seen something they shouldn't, who had crossed a line and knew there was no going back. The warmth of his jacket, which I still wore, was a physical reminder of what had happened in the boathouse. When we stepped back into the cold, buzzing command center of Warehouse 47, the spell was broken. We were no longer two people hiding in the dark. We were at war. "The video Diego took is proof of something," I said, my voice sounding rough in the sterile air of the warehouse. I needed to focus, but it's not enough. Rico will just say it's normal warehouse traffic. We need to connect the people to the money. "The people are scared," Salvatore said. He was standing in front of the massive port map, already the boss again, his face a mask. "You saw them at the restaurant." "They're scared," I agreed, "but now they're angry, and they're safe." I looked at Silas. "That church in Algiers, the Bayou Justice League. I need to go there. Now." Silas looked at Salvatore, raising an eyebrow. "Boss, it's exposed." "She's right," Mara Salvatore said. "She's the only one they'll trust. Go with her. Take the back roads." The soup kitchen was humid and smelled of strong coffee and simmering red beans. It was a cavernous, high-ceilinged space, its plaster walls still water-stained from the last storm. My mother, Elena, saw me first. "Ava!" She rushed forward, pulling me into a hug that felt like it would break my ribs. "Oh, my baby. Diego told me that man the cars." I held her tight. "I'm okay, Mom, I'm okay." I looked over her shoulder. Mrs. Tran, Mr. Pettit, and a dozen other vendors were huddled around mismatched tables, their faces drawn and exhausted. I stepped back, my hands on my mother's shoulders. "I need your help, all of you." I didn't use Salvatore's name. I didn't talk about mafia or guns or the chase on the river. I talked about what they understood. "Those men, Hansen and Pitts, they weren't just shaking you down for $50, I said, my voice echoing in the large room. "I've seen the city accounts. They are stealing the hurricane relief funds, the money that was supposed to fix your roofs, the grants that were supposed to replace your inventory. They are using your fear to sign off on fake invoices." "Mister," Petty slammed his fist on the table. "I knew it. My claim for the freezer denied. They said the funds were depleted." "They're not depleted," I said, my voice hardening. "They're being stolen by Rico Sal, by the Port Hive." I pulled out a stack of blank legal forms Silas had given me. "Affidavits. I need you to write down what happened, the dates, the names, the amounts. I need your signatures. This isn't violence. This is accounting. And it's the only thing that will stop them." For 2 hours, I was a lawyer, an accountant, and a daughter. I moved from table to table, helping them find the words. Finally. I turned to my mother. She was shaking, but her eyes were dry. I pulled out the small digital recorder Salvatore had given me. "Mom, I need you to tell me what they said. The jury, the public, they need to hear your voice." She took a shaky breath, looked at the small black device, and began to speak. Her voice was thin, but it was strong. "My name is Elena Quintana. I have a stall at the Bywater Market. 2 men they came. They said my permit was wrong. They said I owed a fine or they would condemn my stall." I clicked stop and closed my eyes, the weight of her fear settling on me. I had the fuel. While I had been gathering the why, Salvatore had been gathering the how. When I returned to Warehouse 47, the main screen was active. It was split into 4 high-angle feeds, all showing the Swampland Restoration Committee warehouse. "The Dockhands Network," Salvatore said, not taking his eyes off the screen. He pointed to the camera angle, which was high up, looking down. "Crane operators, they see everything on the river." I watched, mesmerized. The footage was time-lapsed, showing the last 48 hours. I saw the white container truck from Diego's video. I saw men from the port hive, but then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A black car with the official gold leaf seal of the city of New Orleans on the side. It backed up to the warehouse. A man got out, handed a briefcase to a port hive guard, and drove away. "They're not just faking it," I breathed. "They're using city resources." "It's worse," Salvatore said. "They're partners." I went back to the terminal, the one I had used before. The numbers, the invoices, they weren't enough. I had to find the mechanism. "Myrtle Kane," I whispered, pulling up her file. "She's the director of coordination. She signs off on everything." I cross-referenced her digital approvals with the server logs. For an hour, I found nothing, just a long list of transactions. Approved, approved, approved. And then I saw it. It was tiny, a discrepancy. "Salvatore," I said, my voice quiet. He was at my side in an instant. I pointed to the screen. "Look at the timestamps. This is the main city server. It logs a request from Gulf Renewal Partners for, say, $80,000. The request is logged at 10:02 a. I pulled up the second log. This is Myrtle Kane's digital signature key. It approves the request at 10:09 a.m., exactly 7 minutes later. He just looked at me. "She's efficient." "She's not," I said, my fingers flying, pulling up dozens of entries. "Look, 10:02, 10:09, 11:16, 11:23, 1:05, 1:12, every single approval, every single time, exactly 7 minutes, to the second." Salvatore's eyes narrowed. "A ghost approval," he murmured. "It's a script, an algorithm. She's not even at her desk. Her credentials are just approving everything." "She's either the laziest criminal in the world," I said, "or she's a patsy. Either way, she's the weak link. If we push her, she'll panic. And when she panics, she'll lead us to Rico." The trap was set. Salvatore's inside man, a coder, not a thug, drafted an email. It was perfectly formatted, sterile, and terrifying. It looked like it came directly from the lead investigative reporter at the Pelican Witness, the city's most feared independent news outlet. It was addressed to Myrtle Kane. Subject: urgent inquiry, Swampland Restoration Disbursements and Gulf Renewal Partners. The body was simple. "Miss Kane, we are preparing a story on a full-scale audit of all hurricane relief funds. We have specific questions regarding your 7-minute approval protocol. We would like to request an interview." "Send it," Salvatore said. We watched. We didn't watch the email. We watched the crypto wallet. For an hour, nothing. Then, the digital wallet that held millions in stolen aid vanished. He bit. I breathed, my heart hammering. "Silas," Salvatore said into his comms. "Trace it." Silas's voice came back a minute later, tinny and sharp. "He didn't move it to another bank. He's smarter than that. He transferred the whole thing, looks like just over $3 million, to a cold wallet. Offline. Oh, he took it all offline." "Where is it?" Salvatore asked. "My source inside Rico's crew says Rico is terrified," Silas reported. He thinks Kane is going to flip. He doesn't trust the banks. He doesn't trust his men. He's keeping the wallet, the physical USB drive on him. No, wait, he's moved it. He thinks the safest place in the city is the safe in his office, at the Swampland Restoration Warehouse. Salvatore looked at me. He's just locked all our evidence in a single box. So we go in. I said, we get the drive. We don't get the drive, Salvatore corrected me. We get the drive, the physical ledgers, and the server logs. We take the entire operation down at once. He looked at the port map. We have 24 hours before he gets spooked again and moves it. I can get you in, I said. I was already at my terminal, pulling up public records, building blueprints, satellite imagery. I can't get you past the guards, but I can get you in. I layered the blueprints over the satellite photo. The security is heavy on the ground, motion sensors, cameras, but here, I pointed. The roof, an old HVAC system, the main ventilation shaft. It's 36 inches. It's wide enough for a person, and it leads right past the server room and ends directly above the main office, where Rico keeps his safe. As I said it, a new alert flashed on one of Silas's screens. It wasn't Rico, it was the weather. Boss, Silas said, his voice grim. The National Weather Service just upgraded that disturbance in the Gulf. It's a named storm now, Tropical Storm Colleen, and the cone of probability it's heading straight for us. A cold dread settled over the room. A storm would wipe out everything. How long, Salvatore asked. Landfall in 48 hours, but the outer ban's the flooding that starts tomorrow night. The warehouse was in the lowest part of the district. It would be underwater in a day. This is too fast, Silas argued, stepping forward. Boss, it's a mess. The storm, the guards. Let's call the Swamp Patrol. We have an arrangement with Captain Boudreau. We give him an anonymous tip. Let them be the heroes. Let them raid the place. No, Salvatore said. His voice was final. Absolutely not. He owes us. I don't care. Salvatore cut him off, his voice like ice. Hurricane money. It's not clean. It touches everyone. The port, the city, the cops. We don't know who Boudreau owes. We don't know who is on Rico's payroll. When that much money is flowing, no one is clean. We do this ourselves. I looked at him. The man who had kissed me in the boathouse was gone. This was Mancini. Salvatore, I said. He turned. The name, my saying his name, still had the power to stop him. If we do this, I said, my voice quiet but shaking with intensity, if we do this your way, I have a condition. He waited. There will be guards, men who are just paid to stand there. Like the men at the restaurant, if they drop their weapons, if they surrender, no one gets hurt. No bullets, no shooting. Promise me. He held my gaze for a long, heavy moment. The air crackled. He was weighing his world against mine. No one who surrenders gets hurt, he said, and it was a vow. You have my word. Good, I said, turning back to the screen, because we don't have 24 hours. I pointed to the audio files I'd collected from my mother and the vendors. We need to light the fuse. Now. Salvatore nodded. He picked up his phone. He sent the audio files and the crane cam footage to an encrypted address, the Swamp Wave podcast. It's the only one Rico can't buy. They're aggressive. They'll run it. When? Primetime drive, he said. Tomorrow. The room was silent, the plan set. We had the public pressure, the podcast, the physical target, the warehouse, and the method, the vent. Then Silas's phone buzzed. He looked at it, his face paling. Boss, his voice was urgent. The storm's accelerating, and Rico's moving. He's not waiting for the audit. He must have seen the storm track. He's at the warehouse. Now, he's loading boxes. My source says he's spooked. He's planning to clear out the safe and move the wallet tonight, before the storm even hits. Salvatore looked at me, the podcast, the plan. The timeline, it was all collapsing. The storm will be a level 2 by dawn, Silas said, reading the update. The district will be evacuating. Salvatore looked at the clock on the wall. The podcast airs in 16 hours. Rico is moving the wallet now. The storm hits in 10. He looked at me, his face carved from granite. Our window is closing. It's not tomorrow. It's now. We have 10 hours, before the storm makes us a ghost and before Rico does the same." There was no more planning. The 10-hour clock was not a deadline. It was a countdown to annihilation. The storm. Colleen was a Category 2 monster, and it was breathing down our necks. We moved. We didn't take the Chevy. We took an anonymous, panelless black van that smelled of rust and ozone. There were 5 of them: Salvatore, Silas, and 3 other men who moved with the same silent, economic grace, and me. I was wearing a black tactical harness over my black silk blouse. My hair pulled back so tight it made my temples ache. I looked ridiculous. I felt terrified. The wind was already screaming when we reached the warehouse. The rain wasn't a drizzle. It was a horizontal assault. It hit the metal roof of the warehouse with a sound like a million drumsticks, a deafening, constant roar that would cover our entry. Salvatore cut the lock on the maintenance ladder with a pair of hydraulic shears that didn't make a sound. One by one, we went up. The roof was a slick, black nightmare, the wind trying to peel us off and hurl us into the river. Silas forced the grate on the HVAC unit, the vent, my target. "Ava!" Salvatore grabbed my arm, his voice a low yell over the storm. His face was wet, his hair plastered to his forehead. He was all eyes. "The server room is first on the line. You'll know it by the blue cables. Plug this in." He handed me a small, black USB drive. "Get the signature keys. Get the server logs. Get out." "I know." "No, you don't." He held my gaze. "Choose your breath, Ava, not the fear. The fear is just noise. The breathing is real. Stay real." He tapped my shoulder. "Go." Silas went first. I went second. The vent was hell. It was a 36-inch wide metal tube, pitch black, and it smelled of rust and dead rats. It was claustrophobic, and the rain on the metal just inches from my face was a deafening, chaotic thunder. I was crawling on my hands and knees, dragging the small pack with my gear. I wasn't a risk consultant. I wasn't a waitress. I was a rat in a tin can. After what felt like an eternity, Silas stopped. He put a hand back. A signal. I heard a click as he used a small scope. Server room below us. 2 guards at the main door, but they're watching a movie on a laptop. They're bored. He worked the grate. It came free with a faint scree. We dropped, one by one, into the room. The server room was freezing, a sudden sterile quiet after the chaos of the vent. The only sound was the high-pitched, steady hum of the mainframes. The blue lights on the racks blinked. Steady as a heartbeat, the 2 guards out in the hallway were oblivious. "Go," Silas whispered, taking a position by the door, his eyes on the guards. I went to the main rack. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the drive. "Choose your breath." I exhaled, long and slow. The shaking didn't stop, but it steadied. I jammed the drive into the port. A small interface popped up on my tablet. I was in. I began the extraction, the signature keys for Myrtle Kane copying, the server logs copying. "Status," Silas whispered. "It's a lot of data. 3 minutes, maybe 4. "We don't have 4. His voice was tight. "He's here." My blood went cold. "Who?" "Rico. He just came in the front. He's not alone. He's got 4 men. They look official. Black suits, earpieces. Fake agents," I breathed. "They're heading to the main office," Silas said, his eyes glued to a small monitor he'd patched into the warehouse security. "They're opening the safe. He's got the wallet. Ava, it's in his hand." My heart stopped. The prize was right there. The extraction was only at 40%. "Boss?" Silas whispered into his own comms, his voice so low I barely heard it. "He's got the wallet. It's Plan B. On your mark." I heard Salvatore's voice, tinny and calm, in my own earpiece. "Do it." I looked through the server room's glass partition, into the main warehouse, and across to the office. The lights were on. I could see Rico Sal, his back to me. He was holding the small, steel-cold wallet. And then the office door opened. Salvatore stepped in. He was alone, his hands empty. He wasn't wearing a harness, just his dark suit, soaked from the rain. He looked calm, almost bored. "Rico," he said, his voice casual. Rico spun, his face a mask of shock and rage. His 4 agents drew their weapons, aiming them at Salvatore's chest. "Mancini!" Rico shrieked. "How the hell did you kill him? Kill him now!" "I wouldn't," Salvatore said, holding up one hand, "unless you want the $3 million on that drive to evaporate." Rico paused. "What are you talking about?" "I'm here for my payment," Salvatore said smoothly. "You're moving. You're cleaning out the account. I want my percentage. Now. Or I make one call, and the authorization code I gave you becomes a destruct key. The wallet wipes itself." A fake payment code. A bluff. It was insane. Rico's eyes were wide. You're lying. You don't have that kind of access." "Don't I?" Salvatore said. "I'm the one who set up the shell companies. Rico, I'm the one who built Gulf Renewal. Did you really think I'd give you the keys without keeping a copy?" It was a brilliant lie. Rico was a thug, not a tech guy. When he was hesitating, he was staring at the wallet in his hand as if it were a snake. That was the feint, and I was the real move. My tablet beeped. Extraction complete. But I wasn't just extracting. Salvatore's bluff had given me an idea. I wasn't here to steal the data. I was here to release it. My fingers flew. I wasn't just copying the cold wallet's key. I was embedding it. I typed in a new script, a dead man's switch. I addressed it to a list of 10 recipients, the Pelican Witness, the Swamp Wave podcast, and 8 different civil rights law firms I'd memorized from my Tulane days. Execute on timer 5 minutes. "What are you doing?" Silas hissed at me. "Making a copy," I whispered. "The data's going public in 5 minutes, whether we get out of here or not." "You're a maniac," he whispered, but I saw a flash of wild respect in his eyes. In the office, Rico was sweating. "Okay, we can make a deal." One of Rico's fake agents, the one I'd called Hatchet Face, was nervous. His eyes were darting. He didn't like this. He didn't like Mancini's calm. "Shut up, Rico!" Hatchet Face yelled. "He's bluffing, just shoot him." He raised his weapon, but he didn't shoot Salvatore. He aimed at the ceiling, a power play, a warning. He fired. The sound of the gunshot inside the warehouse was catastrophic. It was a physical, concussive boom that shook the very walls. And it set off a chain reaction. From outside the office, from the main warehouse floor, I heard shouting. "What was that? Was that a gunshot, Port Authority? We're coming in. Drop your weapons." The real guards, the port's actual security, awakened by the shot. Chaos. "They're cops! It's a raid!" Rico screamed, grabbing the wallet. "Ava, now!" Silas yelled at me. He kicked open the server room door and threw a small, smoking canister into the main hallway. Thick white smoke filled the corridor, obscuring us from the 2 guards. We ran. I didn't run with Silas. I ran toward the office. I saw a fire alarm on the wall, and next to it, a second. Yellow box. Toxic hazard alarm. I didn't hesitate. I smashed the glass and pulled the lever. Instantly, the entire warehouse was filled with a new, deafening klaxon alarm. A synthesized voice screamed, "Evacuation, evacuation, toxic gas detected. All personnel must evacuate." This was the real panic, the real guards, Rico's fake agents. Everyone that they weren't thinking about a raid anymore. They were thinking about breathing. Men were yelling, running for the exits, pulling their jackets over their faces. Rico and his men burst out of the office. In the panic, Rico dropped the heavy, metal-bound shipping ledger he'd been holding, but he kept the wallet clutched in his hand. They ran for the side exit. But Salvatore didn't run with them. He peeled off in the smoke, tackling Rico from the side. They both went down, sliding on the concrete. The open safe. Silas and his men were handling the guards, a blur of motion, disarming them without firing a shot. I sprinted into the office. The safe was open. The wallet was gone. But the ledgers, the physical proof, Rico had dropped one, but the others were still there. I grabbed my phone, flipped to the camera, and started photographing every page, every log. Click, click, click. The flash lit up the smoky room in stark, terrifying snapshots. And then the world ended. A sound like a freight train hitting the building. The entire warehouse groaned. The lights died. Total, absolute blackness. The storm. Tropical storm Colleen had just made landfall. I heard metal screaming as the wind found a weak point in the roof. Rain, not mist, but a deluge, began pouring into the warehouse, flooding the floor. I was alone, in the dark, in a compromised building. Thunk rumble. The backup generator kicked in. Red emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in a bloody, hellish light. And in that red light, I saw I wasn't alone in the office. "You," a voice whispered. Myrtle Kane, the director. She was standing in the corner, her expensive suit soaked, her hair plastered to her face. She wasn't an administrator. She was a co-conspirator. You're the girl from the casino," she hissed, her face a mask of terror. She saw what I was doing. She saw the open safe, the ledgers, my camera. She didn't run. She lunged. She wasn't lunging for me. She was lunging for the ledger Rico had dropped. She grabbed it. And from her pocket, she pulled a road flare. With a hiss, she struck it. Bright, burning magnesium light flooded the office. It's all wet," she screamed, her voice cracking. "It has to burn. It has to burn." She was trying to set the wet pages of the ledger on fire. "No," I yelled, and I tackled her. We went down, a clumsy, desperate tangle of silk and designer wool. The flare skittered across the floor. Sputtering, I grabbed for the ledger. She clawed at my face. I grabbed her wrist, twisting. The flare. She was reaching for the flare. I grabbed it first, the magnesium burning hot. I cried out as the fire licked my palm, a sharp, searing pain. But I had it. I threw it across the room, where it landed in a growing puddle of water and died with a hiss. I got the ledger. I scrambled to my feet, clutching the book in my burned hand. Myrtle Kane just lay on the floor, weeping in the red emergency light. I ran out of the office. The main warehouse was a war zone. Water was 2 inches deep and rising. The wind was howling. I saw Salvatore. He had Rico pinned against a filing cabinet. He wasn't hitting him. He had one hand on Rico's throat, and in the other, he held his phone, the recorder on. "And I used the fake badge," Rico was screaming, terrified. "The urban commerce badge. It was a joke. Just say you'll get me out of here." "Thank you, Rico," Salvatore said, hitting stop on the recording. Whoop, whoop! New sirens. Not the warehouse alarm, police sirens, real ones, close. Salvatore looked at me, his eyes finding mine in the red gloom. He saw the ledger in my hand. He saw the burn. The main doors of the warehouse burst open. Flashing blue and red lights cut through the rain. "NOLA PD, Total Domain Unit," a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "This is a storm evacuation zone. Everyone out, hands in the air." We were trapped, caught between Rico's men, the real cops, and a Category 2 hurricane. Salvatore grabbed my arm, my good arm. "Ava," he yelled over the wind. "The choice, the river or the front door." The river, his world, the shadows, disappear and fight from the dark. The front door, my world, the light, data, evidence, the press. I looked at the cops, their flashlights cutting through the rain. I looked at the sodden, priceless ledger in my hand. I looked at my phone, where the dead man's switch had, 3 minutes ago, sent the truth to 10 lawyers. "The front door," I yelled back. "We walk out the front door." He didn't hesitate. He didn't argue. He just nodded. "Follow me." He put his arm around my waist, holding me against the force of the wind, and we walked. Not running. We walked. Out of the chaos. Into the storm. Myrtle Kane was sobbing, being cuffed by an officer. Rico Sal was on his knees, hands on his head, screaming about his rights. We walked past the flashing lights, past the shouting cops, into the driving rain. "Mancini," a captain yelled, spotting us. "What the hell are you doing here?" Salvatore ignored him. He kept walking, pulling me with him, toward a specific patrol car. A young, drenched female officer was standing by her door, her face set. Salvatore stopped in front of her. He handed her a heavy, waterproof box that Silas had pulled from the van. It contained my phone, the recorder with Rico's confession, and the one dry ledger we had managed to grab. "This is the evidence, Officer Hayes," Salvatore said, his voice calm amid the howling wind. "This is the whole thing. Gulf Renewal, the Port Hive, all of it." She just stared at him, her eyes wide. "For your father," and Salvatore said, "the dock fees. From last year, this makes us square." She looked at the box. She looked at him. She looked at me. Then she took it. She nodded once and secured it in her car. An old favor, a debt paid. Salvatore Mancini had just handed his entire case, his entire victory, over to a rookie cop balancing the scales of a city built on shadows and debts. And he'd done it in the middle of a hurricane, all because I chose the front door. The storm broke. Sometime before dawn, the howling of Colleen finally moved inland, leaving behind a city that was bruised, flooded, and eerily quiet. The sky that morning was a strange, brilliant, scrubbed-clean blue, the kind you only see after a hurricane has scoured the air of all its sins. But the storm we had started was just beginning. I was back in the garret in the Marigny, my burned hand wrapped in clean, white bandages. Salvatore had disinfected and dressed it with the same dispassionate precision he'd used to check his firearm. We had been sitting in silence for hours, him in the armchair, me on the couch, when the first tremor hit. It was 7 a.m. My new burner phone, the one Salvatore had given me, buzzed. It was a link from an unknown number. The Pelican Witness. The headline was a sledgehammer City Hall's ghosts, how the Swampland Committee and a fake federal agency stole millions in storm aid. It was all there. My data, the server logs, the 7-minute ghost approval script, the offshore crypto wallet. The article was surgical, a masterpiece of financial evisceration. An hour later, the Swamp Wave podcast dropped its emergency episode. They didn't lead with the data. They led with the voices. They led with my mother. I listened, my heart in my throat, as Elena Quintana's voice, thin, trembling, but so fiercely, undeniably honest, filled the quiet attic, telling the world how 2 men from the Urban Commerce Bureau had threatened to condemn her stall. They played her audio, then Mr., Pettits, then Mrs., trans. It was a chorus of the small, the scared, and the furious. The city, battered and waking up to flooded streets, listened, and it got angry. By 9 a.m., the Bywater market vendors, led by my brother, Diego, were not hiding in a church. They were marching. It wasn't a riot. It was a quiet, grim New Orleans procession. They walked, 2 by 2, from Algiers over the Crescent City connection and straight down Decatur Street, stopping in front of the locked, dark offices of the Swampland Restoration Committee. They just stood there, holding their useless, invalidated permits. The silence of their protest was louder than any riot. The official dam broke. Before noon, Rico Sal was arrested, not by the Total Domain Unit, but by the state police, who dragged him out of his flooded Lakeview mansion. The charges were wire fraud, conspiracy, and public contract fraud. By 3 p.m., Myrtle Kane was in custody. She had been found hiding in her office, the one I'd left her weeping in, surrounded by half-burned, waterlogged files, forgery, embezzlement, malfeasance. The Urban Commerce Bureau, the fictional agency, was forced to issue a very real press release. "We are fully cooperating. Rogue agents and internal review." They were running for cover. We had won. It had worked. And then the second front of the war opened. Rico Sal's lawyer, a man with a $5,000 suit and a smile like a crocodile, held a press conference on the steps of the courthouse. "And my client, Mr. Sal," he boomed into a cluster of microphones, "is a patriot, a businessman who was forced to protect his investments from a hostile, parasitic criminal element. We will prove that Mr. Sal was the victim of extortion, pressured by the shadowy figure who truly controls the New Orleans port, Salvatore Mancini." Salvatore, who was watching the broadcast on his own laptop, just sipped his coffee, and he didn't even blink. "They're painting you as his boss," I whispered, horrified, "as a co-conspirator." "That was always his play," Salvatore said, closing the laptop. "The street fight is over. The courtroom fight begins. And you," he looked at me, his face unreadable, "are now their star witness." He was right. 2 days later, a very polite, very nervous assistant met me in a secure conference room. I was A.Q., an anonymous consultant. Salvatore's name was never spoken. I was just a woman who had been at the casino. "Miss Q," the D said, "you allege you saw the defendant, Mr. Sal, in possession of this." He slid a photo across the table. It was the fake Federal Integrity Agency badge. "I didn't just see it," I said, my voice steady. "I photographed it. I noted the font, Times New Roman. It was a cheap, obvious fake." "And the contract he showed you?" "It was a ghost," I said. "A secret bid he claimed to have access to. He bragged about it. He bragged about owning a state senator. Your recorder, the one from Officer Hayes, has the whole confession." I walked out feeling drained, but clean. I had used the numbers, just like Mom taught me. But the street fight wasn't over. Silas found me in the garret that evening. Salvatore was out at one of his logistics meetings. "We have a new problem," Silas said, forgoing any greeting. He looked annoyed. "The port hive is broken. Rico's in jail. His crew is scattered. Nature," he said, staring out the window, "abhors a vacuum." "What are you talking about?" "The Camellia crew," he spat. "A different organization. They see an opening. They've already started leaning on the vendors. Mrs. Trans Bakery stall. Someone smashed her front window last night. Mr. Petted his delivery truck, had its tires slashed." He looked at me. "This is the part of the world you don't understand. Ava, the part that doesn't go away with a podcast. They're moving in. They want the protection money Rico was getting." "So we call the police," I said. Silas actually laughed, a short, barking sound. "Right, the police. Who do you think let the Camellias know the territory was open? Boss wants me to handle it." A hard dampening of their enthusiasm. My blood ran cold. He meant violence. He meant putting them down the way Salvatore's world handled problems. "No," I said. Silas raised an eyebrow. "No, it's not your call." "No," I repeated, standing up, my burned hand aching. "You can't protect the vendors by becoming the new Rico Sal. That's not a solution. That's just a change in management." "So what's your brilliant clean hands plan?" "Then," he sneered, "we give the money back." When Salvatore returned, I was waiting. Silas told me about the Camellia crew. He's wrong. Salvatore just watched me, waiting. "You can't just take the territory. Salvatore, you have to earn it. You have to protect it, for real. All that money Rico stole, the $3 million in the cold wallet, the D has it now. It's evidence. It's going to be tied up in asset forfeiture for years. My mother, Mrs. Tran, they'll never see a dime of it. They'll be broken long before that case settles." "Your point," he said, his voice flat. "The Bayou Justice League, the soup kitchen, the pastors, the community leaders. Meet with them. Tomorrow. You're the shadowy man behind the port." "Fine. Be him. You create a new fund, a good rain fund. You fund it yourself. Not with Rico's money, with yours. You make the vendors whole. Right now. You pay for Mrs. Tran's window. You buy Mr. Petted a new truck. You pay their real hurricane claims. You do it in public." He stared at me, his gray eyes searching my face, looking for the angle. "It's not charity," I said, my voice low. "It's a fortress. The Camellia crew can't touch a single vendor if that vendor is being publicly protected by every pastor and community leader in the city. You're not buying their safety. You're investing in it. You're moving out of the shadows and into the light." He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he nodded. Once. The next day, in the rebuilt rain-wash sanctuary of the Algiers church, Salvatore Mancini sat at a folding table. He was flanked by me, by 3 pastors, and by the director of the soup kitchen. He never said a word. He just listened as I laid out the plan. Then, he pulled out a checkbook. He wrote a check. I couldn't see the number, but when he slid it across the table, the lead pastor's eyes went wide. "This is," the pastor stammered, "this is more than enough. This will cover everything." "It's a start," Salvatore said, his first and only words. The Good Rain Fund was born. The street war was over. I had won. Or so I thought. The media went insane. The Pelican Witness ran a news story. The Devil's Donation, shadowy port kingpin Salvatore Mancini, bails out victims of rivals' fraud. His face was everywhere. A grainy surveillance photo from the casino, an old mugshot from his youth, a blurry photo of him leaving the church. He was no longer a ghost. He was a target. The backlash was immediate. I was walking back to the garret from a coffee shop. I'd started to feel like a prisoner and had gone out for air when a young man on a bike sped past, tossing a small, folded note at my feet. I opened it. 5 words, cut from a newspaper. "We know who a Q is." I ran the rest of the way, my heart in my throat. I burst into the attic. Salvatore was there, standing at the window. I stammered, holding out the note. He took it. His face hardened into a mask of cold, pure fury I had never seen. It wasn't the calm control. It was rage. "Silas!" he yelled. The man was through the door in seconds, as if he'd been waiting in the hall. Salvatore just showed him the note. Silas's face went white. "Boss, Oh, get her out of the city," Salvatore commanded, his voice a low, terrifying growl. "Take her to the airport. Get her on a plane. Now. New York, Chicago. I don't care. She's gone." "No." They both looked at me. "I'm not," I said, my voice shaking, but I held my ground. My burned hand throbbed. "This is what they want. They want me to run. They want you to be seen running, hiding your witness, your girlfriend, or whatever they're calling me." I walked up to him, close enough to see the muscle ticking in his jaw. "I'm not running, Salvatore, and neither are you." His fury was warring with something else, that respect. He held my gaze, and the inferno in his eyes slowly banked, replaced by that cold, calculating calm. He nodded slowly. "Silas, double the perimeter. No one," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "gets near her again." The legal battle, however, was just heating up. Rico Sal, facing a life sentence, was desperate. His crocodile lawyer played his last card. He submitted a new piece of evidence to the court, a video. It was grainy, dark, and shaky. It showed an alleyway, somewhere in the quarter. It showed 2 men arguing, and then a third man, a silhouette that looked chillingly like Salvatore stepping out, raising his arm, a flash. One of the men fell. "This video," Rico's lawyer declared, "shows Salvatore Mancini executing a rival. This is the man my client was so terrified of he had to play along." The city was riveted. The D was panicking. Salvatore watched the video in the garret, his face impassive. "It's a fake." "I know," I said, pulling my own laptop over. "But it's a fake won't work in court. You need to prove how—" I downloaded the file. I played it. I played it again. And again. I didn't watch the men. I watched the background. "There," I whispered. "What?" "The light." I pointed to a small red neon sign, a beer logo, in the window of the bar in the background. "It's blinking. It's supposed to be on a loop. On, off, a 2-second cycle." I advanced the video, frame by frame. "Look," I said, my heart starting to pound. "Frame 212, the light is on. Frame 213, it's off. Frame 214, it's on again." I pointed to the man in the foreground, the one who looked like Salvatore. His arm is moving. The shot happens right here, between frame 213 and 214. "It's a cheap jump cut," Salvatore murmured. "It's worse," I said, my fingers flying. "They took 2 separate pieces of footage, one of the men arguing, one of you or someone who looks like you, and they spliced them, but they didn't match the cycle. The neon light, it blinks out of sequence for 1 single frame right at the splice. It's a cheap digital effect. It's like a typo. In the light. The next day, in a closed-door hearing, our lawyer presented my findings. A digital forensics expert confirmed it. The video was a demonstrable, amateur-hour fake. The judge was furious. He threw the evidence out, sanctioned Rico's lawyer, and most importantly, officially severed Salvatore's file from Rico Sal's. Salvatore was no longer a co-conspirator. He was just Salvatore Mancini. The public opinion was now hopelessly, permanently split. Half the city saw him as the well-dressed criminal who had, for his own reasons, exposed a deeper rot. The other half, the half that included my mother, Mrs. Tran, and the people being fed by the Good Rain Fund saw him as a noble monster, an avenging angel. And in the middle of this, I got a call from Diego. "Ava, I got a job." My heart leaped. "What, where?" "The Bayou Justice League. The one you set up the fund with. They said they needed a driver, a delivery driver, to take the food from the kitchens out to the neighborhood centers. It's a real job. Ava, with a paycheck, I'm on the books." I was crying, tears of pure relief. "Oh, Diego, that's amazing." That night, I told Salvatore, and then he just nodded. "It's a good organization." The next morning, I saw Silas in the carriageway, talking to a nervous-looking young man in a Bayou Justice League t-shirt. Silas was looking at the delivery van, checking the tires, looking at the engine. "What are you doing?" I asked. Silas didn't look up. "Boss's orders, making sure the vehicle is safe. Brakes, fluid, engine block. This kid," he nodded at the driver, "is going to be driving Diego. He needs to know that we expect a perfect safety record." He was protecting my brother, but he was doing it his way. He was keeping him clean, but he was making sure the world knew that Diego was, by extension, his... The storm was a memory. The floodwaters had receded. The city was cleaning up. I stood with Salvatore on the balcony of the garret, watching the sanitation trucks. The air was clean and sharp. In the branches of the oak tree across the street, a string of purple, green, and gold Mardi Gras beads, left over from months ago, had been snagged by the storm. They glistened, bright and clean, in the morning light. It felt almost peaceful. Then Silas's phone buzzed. He read the text, and he looked up at Salvatore, his face grim. "It's the Yeah," Silas said. "They're moving Rico Sal, transporting him to the federal courthouse for his final plea." "He's taking a deal," Salvatore said. "It wasn't a question." "He's going to testify," Silas confirmed. "He's going to tell them everything he knows, to save his own skin." "He knows nothing about me," Salvatore said. "That's not the problem, boss," Silas said, his eyes dark. "A deal means he'll say whatever the DB wants him to say. He'll get a script, and the first name on that script is going to be yours." Silas paused and dropped the final bomb. "Or there's the other option, the Camellia crew. They're not happy we shut them out. They just put the word out. They don't want Rico to talk to anyone. They're going to hit the transport to make sure he's silent. The final wave, we were caught. Either Rico testified and the DA built a new false case against Salvatore, or the Camellias attacked, and the ensuing chaos would bury the truth forever, likely with Rico. The final confrontation wasn't in a courtroom. It was on the street, and it was coming. We were trapped. The final wave was coming, and it was a choice between two different kinds of annihilation. Either Rico Sal testified, and the district attorney would write a story, a fiction, using Rico's desperation to paint Salvatore as the kingpin, the true villain. Or the Camellia crew would hit the transport, silencing Rico forever. If Rico died in a hail of bullets, every shadow of a doubt, every unanswered question would stick to Salvatore's name like mud. Heads, they win. Tails, we lose. "When?" Salvatore asked. His voice was flat, the voice of a man calculating odds he already knew were bad. "Tonight," Silas said, his face grim. "The D is rushing it. They're using the cover of Mardi Gras. They think the chaos of the parades will protect the convoy. They'll move him from the parish jail to the federal courthouse at 9 p.m., right when the Orpheus parade hits Canal Street. Mardi Gras, the city wasn't just a city. It was a mask. 1 million people in the streets, a sea of noise and masks and purple, green and gold. The perfect cover for an ambush. The perfect cover for a murder. So we let it happen, Salvatore said, turning to the window. What? I said, stepping forward. We let the camellias make their move, he said, his voice cold. If they silence Rico, the DA has no witness. The case collapses. And a man gets killed in the street, I said, my voice shaking with a cold fury. While his lies are the last thing on record, no, absolutely not. It's the only play, Ava. No, it's not. I said. I was pacing, my mind racing. The hurricane, the dark warehouse, the police sirens. Rico's a liar. The camellias are thugs. The DA is an opportunist. What do they all have in common? Salvatore just watched me. His gray eyes narrowed. They all operate in the dark, I said, the plan forming, hot and fast. They use the shadows, the hurricane, the chaos of Mardi Gras. The only way to beat a shadow is to turn on a light. A light, Silas scoffed. This isn't a movie, Ava. It's about to be. I said. I grabbed my phone. The Swamp Wave podcast, the ones who ran Mom's audio. They owe us. They're hungry. We give them the biggest story of their lives. The story is already out, Silas argued. Not this story, I said, my heart hammering. We tell them where. We tell them when. We tell them about the Camellia crew. We tell them the DA is moving a witness through a parade route. We don't just give them a podcast, Salvatore. We give them a live stream. I turned to him. We put a camera on that convoy from the second it leaves the jail. We put the entire city, the entire world on that street corner with them. The Camellia crew can't make a move if they're on a live feed. The D can't twist Rico's testimony if he's being silenced by a rival crew on camera. We expose all of it. We use the light. Salvatore was perfectly still. I saw the conflict in his eyes. This was the antithesis of his entire life. His power came from the shadows, from being the ghost, the whisper. You're asking me to become a spectacle, he said, his voice dangerously low, to put my face, my name, in the middle of a circus. I'm asking you to win, I said, stepping closer. I put my hand on his chest, right over his heart. I felt its slow, steady beat. That night in the boathouse, you were a ghost, you were a story, and you chose to trust me. You stepped into the light. Choose it again. Choose me again. He looked down at my hand, then back to my face. The muscle in his jaw ticked. He put his hand over mine, his fingers warm. He nodded. Once. Silas, get the Swamp Wave team. Get them a balcony. On the route. Now. The night was electric. It smelled of spilled beer, sugar from 1,000 king cakes, and rain-damp pavement. We were on a second-floor balcony on St. Peter Street, overlooking the turn. The air was a cacophony, 3 different marching bands, the roar of the crowd, the whistle of fireworks. I was trembling, not from cold, but from adrenaline. The Swamp Wave crew, 2 young, terrified, and intensely professional journalists, had their camera set up, wired to a high-speed transmitter. I had my own phone, streaming to a separate feed. Salvatore stood behind me, a solid, warm shadow, his eyes not on the parade, but on the rooftops across the street. They're moving. Silas's voice crackled in my earpiece. 2 blocks out. The parade stopped. The marching band went quiet. The crowd, sensing a lull, surged forward. Here it comes, Salvatore murmured. 2 black sedans and a dark transport van, lights flashing but no sirens, turned the corner. They were moving fast, trying to use the parade's path. And then I saw it, a white panel van, the kind used for deliveries, pulled out from a side street, blocking the convoy's path. That's them, I said, my hand shaking, but I kept the camera steady. That's the Camellias. The side door of the van slid open. Men in dark clothes, their faces covered by masks, Mardi Gras masks, grinning, grotesque, piled out. Pop, 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 pop. The sound was sharp, wrong, cutting through the music. The crowd didn't understand at first. They thought it was fireworks. Then a woman screamed, "Ah!" The panic was instant. It was a wave, a physical thing. As a million people tried to move at once, it was a sea of raw, animal terror. Salvatore grabbed me. When he didn't pull me back, he pulled me into a stone alcove of the building, shoving my body behind a thick column. But he kept his body in front of mine, a human shield, and he grabbed my hand, the one holding the phone, and held it out, steadying it, aiming it like a weapon, keeping the lens on the scene below. He was protecting me, but he was protecting the light. "Silas," he yelled into his comms, "now box them in." From across street, two massive flatbed trucks, the kind the Dockhands network used to move containers, roared to life. They didn't speed in. They just moved. They created a solid steel wall, blocking the Camellia's escape route. The Camellia crew, seeing their exit gone, panicked. They started firing wildly. "Tires," Salvatore roared. "Non-lethal tires only." I heard the hiss of high-velocity rounds hitting rubber. Silas's men, perched on the rooftops, weren't murderers. They were surgeons. The Camellia van was dead in the water. And in the middle of it all, the back of the DA's transport van burst open. Rico Sal. He wasn't in handcuffs. He was running, scrambling out, a rat leaving a trap. He didn't run toward the cops. He didn't run toward the Camellias. He looked up, his eyes wild, scanning the balconies. He saw me. He saw the red REC light on my phone. He saw the source of all his problems. "No," I whispered. "He was running at us. He vaulted a police barricade, kicked open the alley gate of our building." "He's inside," I choked, my blood turning to ice. Salvatore didn't wait. He didn't look for a weapon. He pushed me flat against the wall. "Stay, don't move, and keep filming." He turned. Rico burst through the balcony doors, his face a mask of sweat and fury. But Salvatore was already in motion. He didn't charge Rico. When he did something I'll never understand. He jumped, he vaulted the wrought iron balcony railing, not onto the street, but onto the narrow tin awning of the shop below. I heard a deafening crash as his 200 pounds hit the metal. Rico, stunned, skidded to a halt. In that second, Salvatore launched himself from the awning, grabbing the railing of the next balcony over, and swung himself back, landing between me and Rico. It was the most beautiful, terrifying, and insane thing I had ever seen. Rico screamed, a sound of pure animal rage. He lunged. He was too late. He couldn't get to Salvatore, so he got to me. He grabbed me by the hair, yanking me out of the alcove, an arm like a steel band wrapped around my throat. I felt something cold and sharp press against my skin. A knife. "You!" Rico shrieked, his voice cracking, his spit hitting my face. "You did this! You and him! You're just his puppet! I was terrified. I couldn't breathe, but my hand was still holding the phone, and I could hear Salvatore's voice in my memory. "Keep filming." I angled the phone's camera, not at Rico's face, but down, at the knife at my throat. Everyone is watching you, Rico," I choked out. The live stream feed caught it perfectly. The close-up, the knife, and on the handle, carved into the wood, the small, distinct logo of the port hive. Rico froze. Salvatore stood 5 feet away. He was empty-handed. He didn't raise his voice. He just spoke. "It's over, Rico. You lost." "I'll kill her," he screamed. "I swear to God, I'll kill her." "Maybe," Salvatore said, his voice a calm, lethal balm in the middle of the chaos. "But they'll all see you do it. The camera is on. The feed is live. There's nowhere to hide. So you have a choice. Right now, you can drop the knife and plead your case in the light, or you can disappear into the dark. And tonight, Rico the Light is winning." Rico was trembling, his arms shaking. He was broken. From the street below, the noise had changed. The panic had stopped. The crowd, drawn by the drama on the balcony, was watching. The marching band had gone silent. And then, a new voice, a single shout from the street. "Let her go." It was Diego, and he was standing on the street, his face pale, his fist raised. Then Mrs. Tran, "Let her go." Then the whole crowd, it wasn't a roar, it was a chant. "Let her go." Rico looked down, his eyes wide with the terror of a million witnesses. He hesitated. That was all she needed. A figure in a dark blue NOLA PD uniform was suddenly there. She hadn't come from the street. She'd come from inside the building, from the other side. Officer Hayes, the rookie, the det. She didn't draw her gun. She moved like Silas. She grabbed Rico's wrist, the one with the knife, and applied pressure, a single, expert twist. Rico screamed, a high, thin sound. The knife clattered to the balcony floor. Hayes spun him around, slammed him against the brick wall, and the click, click, click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. It was over. The live stream exploded. The Swamp Wave feed had over 1 million concurrent viewers. The footage of the Camellia Cruz van, their license plate, their masked faces, it was everywhere. The footage of Rico Sal, confessed killer, holding a knife to my throat, it was undeniable. The Federal Integrity Agency, the fake badge, Rico's confession, it was all now part of an unstoppable public record. The D didn't get his star witness. He got a monster caught in the act by the very people he'd tried to victimize. The entire rotten case collapsed. In the street, the marching band, after a stunned silence, suddenly started to play. A wild, defiant, joyous jazz funeral. The air filled with paper confetti, shot from a parade float that had gotten stuck in the chaos. Salvatore hadn't moved. He was just watching me, making sure I was real. The noise of the street, the sirens, the music, the cheering, it all faded away. It was just him. The silence of that back room at the Bayou in Brass, the silence of the boathouse in the rain. I walked over to him, through the rain of colored paper. I put my hands on his chest. I looked up into those gray, gray eyes. "Salvatore Mancini," I said. I didn't whisper it in fear. I didn't say it as a challenge. I said it because it was his name. He put his arms around me, pulling me in, and he kissed me. He kissed me on a balcony, in the middle of Mardi Gras, with 1 million people watching on the street and 1 million more watching on their phones. He wasn't a shadow. He wasn't a ghost. He was real. And the city, our city, seeing it all, roared its approval. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We're so grateful to have you here. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from. We truly love to see how far these stories travel and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you really want to support us, please hit that hype button to help this story be heard by even more people.